Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
It was dark outside the windows and another heavy, full of thoughts. Night was coming. Alexander couldn't sleep. He kept tossing and turning in one place. He would lie on his back or turn over on his side. It seemed to him that from the garage heard a suspicious noise and shouting. Well, I'm in trouble. It was necessary to get so hid. If my wife didn't find out, she'd file for divorce immediately. She'll say that I've got a brother. The zeros are over. Hey, it's too late to change anything. If you're already on the slippery slope, get out of it as best you can. The main thing is not to shine before the time. His wife turned to Alexander and hugged him by the shoulders. Alexander, why are you sleeping? Insomnia again. Take sleeping pills so you'll fall asleep faster. Angelica, sleep. Everything is fine. It's just been a hard day. You know me, your Alexandra will always think of something to occupy your brain at night. The woman sighed and kissed her husband on the cheek. She turned on her side and was soon snoozing peacefully. My darling, if you knew what I've done, you'd probably be packing your things right now, Alexander thought tiredly. He tried, but in vain. His head stubbornly refused to relax. The old man got up, put on his robe, and tiptoed out of the bedroom. There was an ominous, suspicious silence in the house. The man stepped out of the house and froze, listened. The moon shimmered dimly. Not a single rustle. I wondered if it seemed so. I'll check anyway, Alexander said to himself. Nature seemed to have frozen in expectation of sudden changes. The old man stood for a while at the door of his own garage. His frowning face was illuminated by the glare of the moon. From this mysterious light, falling at a peculiar angle, Alexander's appearance was truly menacing and even mystical. Nature seemed to be frozen in anticipation of something sinister. Alexander stood for a moment at the door of his own garage. A moment more, and he pulled the handle decisively. The room was warm. The owner liked to spend a lot of time in the garage, repairing his car, so the man even installed gas heating, so as not to freeze. Ford, the love and pride of Alexander's entire life, stood in complete darkness. The round headlights reflected the light of the moon peeking from behind the half-open door. The man touched the car with great tenderness, cold, but ready to start at any moment. Just like an angry woman. He touched the trunk, leaned into it, and whispered, "Be patient for a while. I'll let you out soon. Just sit quietly. There are plenty of ravines around. No one will notice your disappearance." Alexander was born in the forgotten town of Kissimmee, California. His mother, Selena, was Afro-American, his father a true dag, living according to all the canons of Islam. At first, the young lived soul to soul. But when the children were born, things took a turn for the worse. Alexander's father worked practically round the clock, and when he came home, his mother was badly beaten for any trifles. She served food to the table in a wrong way or did not do a good job in bed. Alexander, like his mother, did not like the presence of his father at home. The boy, hearing the sound of heavy work boots outside the door, pulled his head intensely into his shoulders, waiting with fear for the next scandal. The father never pitied, neither the children nor the mother. Therefore, the image of the most kind-hearted man who believed in the justice of the laws of the Koran sank into memory, hidden behind an incomprehensible haze. Alexander's sisters, Olivia and Katie, unconditionally followed all the instructions of the strict head of the family. They were terrified of cruel punishments. The day came when their mother could no longer tolerate their father's behavior. But how to escape? Where to? The parents are far away in the United States, and leaving is an impossible mission. A woman in this country has no rights, no liberties. The first time the mother and children tried to run away from home, when the father once again went to work. The documents of his wife and children were well hidden by a calculating man, but he did not even guess that the mother has long known about the stash and waits for the moment to leave quietly. The woman gathered the most necessary things, found the stash of documents, and ran out of the house. A cab was waiting for her at the gate. Selena decided to get as far away as she could. Next, she would find a hostel and settle in. Then, she would go to the embassy to legally leave the city. But everything went wrong. The neighbors, seeing that the mother and her children were leaving in a hurry by car, immediately called Haze. The neighbors saw the mother and children leaving in a hurry in a car and immediately called Haze, but no one was there. Haze gathered his friends and neighbors of the men and asked about the car and the driver who had witnessed the family's escape. A few hours later, the man found his wife and children near one of the inexpensive hostels. Haze took the unwanted with the children home and put them under lock and key. Now the mother had no right to see the children. The man hired a housekeeper, an old fat woman who smelled bad. The housekeeper had to clean the house, cook food, look after his wife and children, carry water and food to them. What was going on in Selena's soul at that time was hard to describe. Now she was deprived of everything: the opportunity to go to her homeland, to see her father and mother, to raise her children in love and respect. What will they see in this hole? I should have listened to my mother. She was right. A hot temper is not always an indicator of love, thought the woman, wiping tears from her face. A few years passed. Haze again allowed the woman to move around the house, but the housekeeper remained. The woman knew that the old woman was looking after the family. Now to escape, one had to be more cunning. The mother had to gain her husband's trust, do as he told her, to fulfill his every whim. It was very difficult. The man was a tyrant. He liked to abuse his wife. But the mother, who wanted to leave the walls of the house as soon as possible, tolerated and obeyed. The children knew everything and listened to their mother. Only Alexander was contradictory. He refused to spend time with his father, did not accept toys from him. The man was very angry. Alexander, well, be patient a little. Soon we will leave, whispered his mother, hugging the child. You just need to obey your father, and he'll be kinder. Mom, I can't see him beating you. How he bullied you. Why can't we just call the police? They'll put him in jail and we'll be gone. Baby, if only it were that simple. Only in fairy tales there's a magic carpet airplane, a good witch who helps people. In the regular world, you have to fight for everything. You're a fighter, aren't you? Look, your sisters listen to me, and your father stopped watching them a long time ago. And your bad behavior and unwillingness to talk to him only draws your father's attention. Be nicer to him, even if you have to smile. Mom, I will do everything as you want, uttered her boy. But when I grow up, I will fight by my own rules. No one will hurt my family. Lord, give a real childhood to my children. Let my husband forget about us for at least a minute and we'll run away, prayed the kneeling woman. The police in California could not help the mother in such a delicate situation. It was her own fault. She had to please her husband, not contradict him. Neighbors also did not want to interfere in the showdown. They had enough to do. The American woman was left alone with her heavy burden. Help came from where she didn't expect it. One day the old housekeeper Betty beckoned the woman to her. She didn't speak English well, but her mother could understand her. It's time for you to run away. Your parents went to the embassy in your country, but they couldn't help them. They said you have to go to the California Department of Corrections and prove that your husband is torturing you and the children. Then you can leave. Betty, but how did you find out about all this? Why are you telling me all this? The woman winked. I was paid well by a handsome man. He's been asking about you. He looked like a real American, dressed like an American. I won't give you away. Don't be afraid, the old woman said hastily when she saw the woman's frightened look, so that you can leave quickly. I'll back you up, distract the master if necessary. Thank you, Betty. The young woman was overjoyed. There was a ray of light ahead. Not all was lost. The main thing is to get to the department unharmed, and there she will not be allowed to offend. The days flew by. The woman waited stubbornly for the moment when Betty would say she could leave. Selena lay on the low divan. Haze had left for work an hour ago. They had had another argument. The man had said he would have a serious talk with her when he returned. Selena knew what he meant. A severe beating was unavoidable. The children sat quietly in their room. There was a rustling in the doorway. The woman stood up and quickly opened the door. It's time for you and the kids to go. I'll take you out through the backyard so the neighbors won't tell your husband. Betty, what a joy. But what about you? They'll kill you. Don't worry, I'll walk you out and I'll be out of the house in no time. He won't find me. I'll be taken care of. Little Alexandra overheard his mother and the housekeeper talking. He went back to his room and said to his sisters, "Time to pack. Remember where your bags are. Grab them and wait by the door. Alexander felt a sudden rush of courage and responsibility for Olivia and Katie's lives. Meanwhile, the mother gathered the bags. Beatty gave her their papers. "Where did you find them?" Selena asked, deeply surprised. Haze had hidden them. "Thank you, kind woman. I will never forget what you did." They embraced. Selena was crying with joy. "All right, mistress, we can't wait. Take the children and let's go. He's been waiting for you for a long time." "Who is he, this kind soul? How did he find me?" thought the woman with interest as she and the children ran across the yard to the back exit. At the gate stood an old dirty car of an obscure model. A tall Afro-American man was waiting for them. "Let's go, all questions later." The woman put the children in the car and looked at Betty. She stood 2 steps away and smiled. "Betty, run now. God forbid anyone should see you." The housekeeper sighed heavily and walked back into the house. Her heavy footsteps could already be heard on the porch. Selena looked at her. She didn't even know then that this was the last time she would see Betty alive. The man got behind the wheel, quickly started the car, and they raced along the narrow roads of Kizior. "Tell me, Selena, how did you get into the clutches of this animal? Didn't you see where he came from and what customs his people had? All you women are fools. First, you marry foreigners. Then you look for a place to escape from this beast. Muslims are strict. It's not like the US. It's good that your parents told me, asked me to help you. Tell me, who are you?" The man started talking. "I'm a volunteer. I work with people like you. I help them get justice, help them avoid death at the hands of a Muslim tyrant. I'm new to California. Your father and mother contacted me. I don't know where they found my phone number, but I decided I had to go before the worst happened." The girls in the back seat fearfully squeezed each other, and Alexander listened attentively to the conversation of adults. Of course, he did not quite understand a lot of things, but the main idea caught them saved. The boy was not at all sorry for his father. The child for his short life has not seen anything good from the man, except for the demands, humiliation of his mother. "I am very grateful to you," the mother said with warmth in her voice. "I can't even convey my joy. I once tried to run away from my husband, but it didn't work. Now we will come to the department," the volunteer reassured her, "and you will tell us how everything happened in the family. The children should be with you. Their testimony is also very valuable. If everything goes well, you'll be divorced even without the presence of your husband." "Can you tell me your name?" Selena asked. "Evan is the easiest name to understand. Evan. Evan, I'll find you when you get back to the US. Thank you so much." As the man dropped off the mother and children in the courtyard of a large white building, Selena sighed with relief. Now she could not be afraid. People who are loyal to wives work here. A week passed. Selena successfully ended her marriage to Haze. The man found out that his wife was hiding in the department, and he even got them to let him in to see his disreputable wife. But Selena knew how it would end and refused to see the man, citing that he could cause irreparable harm to her children. Haze harbored a grudge against her. Finally, the day came when the woman and her children were able to leave California and return to their native country. All the necessary documents were ready. But when Selena was walking, practically running with her children, accompanied by Evan the volunteer and several other representatives of the United States in California, to the airplane ramp, disaster struck. From the direction of the department's back exit, sharp gunshots suddenly rang out. Olivia and Katie immediately fell to the ground. Alexander and Selena were covered by Ivan. His chest was quickly covered with bloodstains. "Get to the plane. You can't save your daughters, save your son." Selena, howling with pain and grief, grabbed Alexander and ran into the airplane. Behind her back, the volunteer who had saved innocent lives twice screamed hoarsely in pain. As the plane took off, through a veil of unceasing tears, Selena saw through the porthole as the local police in full uniform ran onto the takeoff pad. They had taken her ex-husband in a ring and had pulled the man to the ground. The woman looked painfully at the bloody bodies of the girls, but they didn't move. Evan froze too. "I'm sorry, I didn't keep you safe," Selena sobbed, when the plane had already gained altitude and the whole bloody picture disappeared from sight. Little Alexander didn't cry. He huddled in the corner of his chair and stared at one point. On his table was the standard meal of porridge, a piece of bread, an apple, and a fresh cherry. It was the cherry that looked very much like the drops of blood on the sister's cheeks. "I didn't feel like eating at all." "Sonny, my darling," Celine whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't keep you all safe." The woman pressed the boy with force, as if she was afraid that now he would fall to the ground from the airplane. Russia met the fugitives with bright sunshine and warmth. Spring was in full swing. Selena looked with pleasure at the native expanses, which she had not seen for a long time. Far below were birch groves, green fields, and such green had never been, all yellow wastelands and burdocks. When the plane landed, the woman exhaled. That's it, you can no longer be afraid of anything. Her parents ran to the gangway, her mother crying and her father ruffled. Such dear faces. Haze had prevented the woman from communicating with her parents even over the internet. The first meeting after a long separation was overwhelmingly joyful, full of tears. "Where are the girls?" Selena asked the mother. She only shook her head and burst into tears. "Haze, he killed them," Alexandra said slowly. He stood with his fists clenched tightly. His gaze read determination, anger, and even rage. He had taken from his father everything a man needed, a hot-hearted, brave man. His life was just beginning. The most interesting things awaited the boy ahead. "Hey, Alexander, take it easy," shouted John impetuously. The old man stood near the house and watched how the guy sharply accelerates, then just as sharply reduces speed. "Stop, I say." John couldn't stand it any longer and followed the dust cloud. "I shouldn't have taught him. He's gone completely off the rails, grandson." Alexander saw nothing in front of him. He flew like a bird, slightly twisting the steering wheel on the turns. It seemed to him that in a moment he would take off. He just had to clamp the gas pedal tighter. His grandfather was running behind him and waving his fists. "Now, grandfather!" Alexander shouted through the window and pressed the gas pedal even harder. He drove into the field and raced straight down the dusty road. There was nothing to breathe in the car, so he had to close the windows. Alexander drove up to a shallow lake and stopped the car. The water beckoned to its depths. The guy quickly undressed and dived into the coolness. How good it felt! Alexander dived again and again, reached the bottom with his hands, scaring small fish. Having swum to his heart's content, the guy got out of the water and shook himself like a big dog. It was wildly hot, but it was cool near the lake. Alexander liked this place. Few people came here, too far from the village. The guy let the sun dry his skin and brown it a little, then quickly got in the car and drove back. Now my grandfather will give me a task, Alexander smiled to himself. More than 10 years had passed since little Alexander had set foot on American soil, having escaped from Kizyar with his mother. The boy was very much worried, cried all the time. He had the same nightmare every night. He looks at his dead sisters and his mother calls him to the plane. Selena had to find a good psychiatrist for Alexander. Long months of rehabilitation of the boy gave their fruits. Alexander became much easier, and time a little tightened the fresh wounds of memory. Alexander's mother traveled more than once to Washington, D.C., to the California embassy. She wanted to know how her daughters were buried, what happened to her ex-husband, and what was the fate of even the volunteer. She learned from the rulers that Olivia and Katie were buried by neighbors with full honors in the local cemetery. Haze was sentenced to life in prison for killing his daughters and Beatty, the family's housekeeper. Even the volunteer survived and was now rehabilitating after being wounded in Washington, D.C. Selena even traveled to the capital to visit the guy who saved her life. There they had an affair, but the woman was in no hurry to go home to please her parents. She fell through the ground. Alexander's grandparents desperately tried to find Selena, but then in Soviet times, investigations into the disappearance of people were conducted for a very long time and often did not bring any results. Alexander at first was very grieving for his mother. You bet, the boy had witnessed the murder of his siblings, lost his father, and now his mother. No. His mother abandoned him, left him and went to another man. The search for his mother has not yielded any results. The militia has been throwing up their hands. If she left with the man she loved, it means that she had her reasons. Selena's father and mother grieved very much, but there was nothing to do. They had to bring up their grandson. He was left an orphan with living parents. It is probably impossible to describe in words how difficult it was for John and Leslie. The boy had to dress and eat well. His grandfather had to find part-time work, and his grandmother adapted to bake cakes and pastries to order. That's how they lived. Selena did not make herself known. Alexander began to gradually forget about his mother. He quickly grew up and more resembled his father. Black curls, brown eyes, dark skin, and sharp temper. As a teenager, the boy often got into fights. Not even because he had been wronged. He didn't like injustice and often defended the weak. Leslie, once again visiting the principal's office, listened to a whole lecture that her grandson is a real street kid. He steals money from school children, fights, skips lessons. Alexandra, in turn, at home swore that all this is a pure lie. One day the phone rang in Leslie's room. The woman quickly picked up the phone. "Hello, who is it?" There was a rustling and sobbing sound in the receiver. "Mommy, hello. It's me." Leslie froze in surprise. She had never hoped that she would ever hear her daughter's voice. "Selena, are you okay? Where are you?" "Mom, I'm fine. I'm with Even. We're expecting a baby." Joy was quickly replaced by anger. "So you left us Alexander, abandoned him, and decided to start a new family," the woman yelled, furious. "Mom, you listen to me." "No, you listen to me. Your father and I work day and night to feed Alexander, and you haven't even sent him a birthday card once. Do you realize that Alexander calls us Mom and Dad? He's completely forgotten you." Mommy, Selena on the other end of the line burst into tears. "Alexander looks so much like Haze. I can't look at him. It brings back memories of all the abuse from my ex-husband. Mommy, I'll make up for it only when we get back on our feet with Vanya, and I'll send you some money." "You know what?" Leslie said in a murderously quiet voice. "We don't need your money. We should have taken care of it earlier. I won't tell Alexander anything about your call. Let the boy grow up peacefully knowing that you just vanished into thin air. Don't call here again. You're not our daughter now." Leslie hung up the phone with a bang and burst into tears. "What's wrong, Grandma?" A disheveled grandson came running into the room. "He just woke up." "Nothing, Alexander. It happens to me," quietly said Leslie, and with great tenderness pressed his grandson to himself. "Adults are such strange people. Sometimes to get rid of problems, we need to cry." Alexandra, not understanding what the grandmother is saying, just silently pressed against her, the most dear person. "Oh, you scoundrel," yelled John, holding onto his heart. "Who authorized you, you little brat, to go so far away? Tell me." Alexander got out of the Ford and laughed merrily. "Grandpa, you've been teaching me to drive for almost 3 years. I know your car like the back of my hand. Why are you yelling? I'll show you how to fly on the road. You don't even look around, you insolent bastard. What if you'd hit someone?" "Grandpa, I did everything very carefully and adjusted the mirrors. What's the matter with you, really?" Alexander carefully hugged John. He grumbled for a long time, but the old man's heart thawed a little. "Let's go wash her now. You see how grimy she is," the grandfather mumbled with his toothless mouth. Alexander nodded in agreement. They got into the Ford and drove into the yard. A water fountain was bouncing merrily. The drops of water, passing through the sunlight, shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. Alexander ran with a rag and washed the car windows. The 1972 model year was John's main pride. His grandfather had been saving up for a car for a long time. He wanted to buy a Ford, but he had to spend part of his financial reserves on Alexander, and there was no money for the third member of the family. John, not thinking long, got on an electric train and went to the capital. From there he returned happy, turning the steering wheel of a new Ford. Leslie only waved her hands. She had expected her husband to buy something larger, with additional passenger seats. "Wife, come on, get in. You will ride next to me," the old man said with pride in his voice. He was glowing with happiness. Leslie shrugged and tried to sit on the seat. She did not succeed the first time, but the woman was quite sturdy. "Come on, John, I'll sit in the back." "What? Are you afraid?" The old man laughed. "It's all right, you can relax with me." "Alexander, come here, you're coming with us." Ford pleasantly rumbled, and the happy family left on the first trip on 4 wheels around the village. Rode to a shine, the car shone like a precious stone. Neighbors, hearing the roar of the Ford, ran out into the street. Some watched with fear as John turned the car sharply, while others whistled with delight. Alexandra, proud as a peacock, looked out of the open window. Only rich people had cars in the village. But John glowed as if he too had been polished to a shine. Leslie gave a deafening gasp as the car bounced on the big bumps. The woman had never driven a car like this. "It flies like a dragonfly," she marveled. "That's right, wife. Now we can go wherever we want." "Where do you want to go?" "Let's go to Washington," smiled the wife. "I was there only once." "When?" "So no." John interrupted her, No, Washington first. We go on a camping trip. Alexander, are you with us? Alexander nodded happily. He had enjoyed the ride in the automobile terribly. Now the boy dreamed that they would all go together to the end of the world, to the sea. John snorted and washed himself under the jets of water. Grandfather, give the polish, Alexander called. The guy stood all wet with a rag in his hands. In a moment, I'll fly, the old man squawked and went into the barn. Meanwhile, behind the fence, someone called the guy. Alexander looked outside the gate. Harry. Hi. What, you were racing through the fields again? A friend smiled broadly. Come on, let's go for a walk. Come on. But I just need a little help with my grandfather's car. Harry jumped over the hedge. The friends quickly got on with the simple job. Don't do any tricks, John whispered to his grandson, so we don't have to pick you up from the children's police station again. Grandpa, everything will be fine, said Alexander cheerfully. He changed his clothes and headed to the center of the village, discussing with a friend the news of the day. Listen, your Angelica is going to go to the pedagogical university, Harry whispered worriedly. Alexander made a disgruntled grimace. Angelica Sokolnikova, Alexandra's girlfriend, was planning to enter the Moscow Food Technical School. Why the new plans? I'll go talk to her. What's the joke? The guy was genuinely surprised. Well, that's why I came to you, whispered Harry. She's with the girls on the climb. I decided to tell you the whole truth about your beloved. Shall we go together? I have to talk to her myself. Alexander stopped the curious boy. Understood, Harry grumbled. They said their goodbyes, and Alexander headed towards the climb. From there, a deafening girlish laughter could already be heard. Angelica, look, yours is coming, Marina yelled. Angelica was sitting with her back to Alexander. She turned around and happily waved her hands. Alexander, and I was just going to you. I can already guess why, Alexander said grudgingly. The hot blood of his father played in him. Alexander, what are you doing? The girl raised her eyebrows in surprise. Let's go, let's talk. Alexander dragged her by the hand. Let go, it hurts me. Angelica shrieked. Alexander came to his senses a little. The girl's shout stopped her. The guy stood for a second, then turned around and went home. Stop. Why did you come? Angelica shouted. Nonsense, Alexander muttered, without turning around. Well, go away. It sounded behind me. I was going to leave you anyway. You're too hot-tempered. We can't be together. Alexander went even faster. Angelica's words cut with a knife. What a fool I am. I trusted her and she was just mocking me. Well, so be it. Let her go wherever she wants. I wanted to howl with anger, to go back, to say something hurtful. But the guy knew too well his temper would get him into trouble. Several months passed. The young people from the village left for their studies. Alexander was also going on the road. He successfully entered where he wanted. The capital kindly opened to him the road to a great future. Angelica never came to see him off. Apparently, the girl was afraid to show her face. Washington kindly opened her arms to the boy. 10 years passed. Alexander rarely appeared in the settlement. Old people only occasionally received his letters. It was the dashing 90s. Everyone earned as much as they could. Money was critically lacking, but John sent the last penny to his grandson. He knew how hard it was in the capital. And what was his surprise when the grandfather received from his grandson a weighty package with a letter. There was money in the bag. My dear grandparents, I am writing to you with great love. I am doing well. I found a great job. I've moved into a rented apartment. I'm sending you money so that you don't need anything. By the way, Angelica from our village has moved in with me. We're together now. Grandpa, buy new spare parts. That should be enough money. I want your swallow to serve you for a long time. Grandpa, you should buy a new dress or a scarf. I'll help you every month with money. Don't worry, I'm fine. Your beloved Alexander. Wife, shouted the grandfather. Come here. What's going on? The old woman fussed. She was baking pies in the kitchen and came running into John's room, covered with flour and dough. I'll wipe my hands. Did your grandson write a letter? He did. The old man threw a stack of bills on the bed. Oh my God, Leslie begged. So he must have joined some criminal group, you naughty boy. I've seen a lot of that on TV in big cities. Oh my God. The old woman clasped her hands in mute prayer. So grandmother, don't be so hot. Maybe you really found a job. Pack your things, let's go to visit him. I'm feeling a little uneasy. Leslie fussed and pulled out a large suitcase, and John went into the yard to tidy up the fort before the long journey. The old people were right. Alexander at that moment roofed peddlers at the market and beat out of them money for safety, and his Angelica got the rarest collections of clothes, jeans, suits, foreign jackets. The guy got into the grouping not by accident. One of his friends offered to earn good money. As they say, if you have entered back, there is no way back. Alexander realized that the case is bad, smells of crime, but there was no turning back. Criminal authority nicknamed Shram kept all his subordinates at gunpoint. He knew where the guy's parents lived, and in any case he could raid there and make a mess. Alexander tried to hide from Scar, but he found the guy and gave him the last chance to correct himself. When extra money began to appear, the guy decided to help his relatives. But so he once again slept in front of his grandfather and grandmother. John and Leslie never made it to Washington. They died on the highway when they collided with a truck. The grandfather gave his soul to God at once, and the old lady died in the intensive care unit from blood loss. Alexander learned about this terrible accident only after a few days. Hospital workers could not find relatives for a long time. The guy buried his grandfather and grandmother in the village with all honors. A little wrinkled guy decided to restore Shram, kindly offered the services of his service station. "And you need to fix such a bunkin," he said in surprise when Alexander brought the car on a tow truck. "I'll bring you a foreign car from the Baltics. Do you want it? This is a memory of my grandfather. He was instead of my father," Alexander muttered, and tears came to his eyes. "I'm sorry, brother, for touching the notes of your soul. I didn't mean to." Scar, though he was a bouncer in a gang, could sympathize sometimes. "Listen, why don't we give your Ford a little makeover? New wheels and rims, repainted, tinted, and the interior could use a makeover. We'll put in a new stereo so it'll kick ass. Eh? Let's do it. It's a good idea," the guy agreed. Suddenly his cell phone rang in his pocket. "I'm listening," said Alexander. There was dead silence in the receiver. Then something clicked and a sob was heard. "Sonny, I'm sorry to bother you." "You have the wrong number," the guy mumbled and wanted to press off. "No, please," pleaded the woman. "I took your phone number from a nurse. When you were wounded in the hospital, I worked there as a nurse. I recognized you right away. I'm sorry I didn't come up to you and say hello. I was right next to you when you were discharged. I didn't dare. I couldn't. And now I'm dying. It's a boomerang, and I've had a bad life. Your grandparents are probably looking after you, aren't they?" "They're dead," Alexander hissed angrily. "Who are you? Why are you calling me? My mother abandoned me. She's not even interested in my fate." "Alexander, my dear, I left you." "Yes, you did." At the other end of the wire, a woman's hurried voice was heard. She was probably afraid that the guy would hang up early, and she would not have time to say the most important thing. "I don't have much time left. My husband died, Evan. Remember? He saved you and me. I was pregnant with his baby, but it was stillborn. And now it's the other way around. Our second child was born, but my husband is gone, dead of lung cancer. You have a brother. I'd really like you to meet him." "I'm not interested in all this. I lost my mother many years ago. You probably want money from me, don't you? Charlatan." Alexander pressed the button. That's it. Silence. The woman never called again. "What's the problem, brother?" Scar's face was right behind Sasha's back. He was squinting curiously at the guy. "No, it was a wrong number." Alexander shrugged. "They were telling me some bullshit about a new rejuvenation procedure." Scar laughed loudly. "You suggested to your fiancée, Angelica. I think she'll appreciate it." "Angelica, you're the only thing I have now," the guy thought fondly. A month later, Alexander drove the updated Ford out of the garage. Scar invested a lot of money to fix the dents, broken glass, some parts. The car was repainted red, and black stripes were put on top of the hood. Ford now looked like a racing car. Alexander was pleased and happy like a child. The late grandfather's pride was on the move again. The old man heard a mooing. Inside the car, stubbornly wanted to communicate with him. "You know, I've seen so much in my life you have no idea," whispered Alexander, tightly pressed against the trunk. The sounds got louder. "And if you had imagined it, you go gray. I disarmed more than one criminal group with this car. And how many times I've raced it with brothers. And I always came in first. You got the wrong guy. You think if I drive an old car, I'm gonna get hurt? Now lie there and think. I hope you're comfortable. Angelica pressed her lips together. Talking about a new car irritated Alexander. How could Angelica talk about such things? She was not the one who sat and repaired the radiator for hours. She was not the one who repainted the scratched trunk for the third time. Women are one word. Irritated by the conversation with his wife, the old man went to the garage. The family lived in the suburbs of Washington. In a very prestigious village, Alexander was able to earn enough money for a rich old age. While her husband was hobbling around in the Ford, Angelica was packing a snack for a fishing trip and preparing a carrier for Rocky. The woman loved going out. She liked to spend time in nature or, in general, out of the house. Alexander was silent all the way, and only when he was sorting out the bags with fishing rods he calmed down a little. Rocky was already frolicking in the grass, and Angelica spread a colorful plate and laid out food: fruit, baked potatoes, sandwiches. Her husband had already chosen a spot and spread his fishing rods with bait. Angelica quietly approached him. "Don't be angry," I snapped. "It's all right. I am no longer angry," condescendingly replied Alexander. His gaze was focused on the fishing line in the river water. "You know, I even like it, a rarity after all. It's been through so much with us." "Yes, it has. It will survive us," Alexander said quietly. At that moment, someone took the bait. The line twitched. Another moment and grandfather, with a shout of joy, pulled out a crucian carp. The fish was caught on the side of the hook and twitched ridiculously. "It's a pity he can't let it back out. The wound is too deep. We'll have to fry it," he said sadly. Angelica's attention was distracted by a noise coming from a little above the clearing where they were camped. While her husband was fishing, the woman quietly walked up the path. The path was so steep that sometimes Angelica had to grab onto large weeds growing out of the ground. Finally, the woman made her way out into a nearby clearing. The place was very tempting. Angelica even regretted that she and Alexander had not climbed a little higher. The clearing was surrounded on all sides by old birch trees, and the middle was empty, without bushes and trees. Very cozy, but something else caught the woman's eye. In the distance, at the very edge of the clearing, a fire was burning. "Well, it's an outrage. Who would think of burning a fire in the forest? It's not far to a fire." Angelica looked at the people who were at the fire, but without her glasses it was extremely difficult to see their faces. A little to the left stood a few foreign cars of the latest models. "I wonder how they got here. We'll have to take a closer look," Angelica thought. Just then, a cat darted under the woman's feet with a growl and hiss. It was Rocky. He, like lightning, rushed on all sails to the merry company. "Rocky, stop. You stupid animal. You'll get caught in the fire." But the fat man didn't react. Angelica had no choice but to follow the cat to the fire. Up close, it became clear that in the clearing gathered local majors, sons of rich parents. Angelica knew almost all of them by sight, but one guy remained a mystery. He kept a little apart from the others. Seeing the disheveled Angelica, the company started throwing obscene jokes in her direction. "They're drunk." A hunch flashed through the woman's mind. "We need to be careful with them." "Who the hell is this?" yelled one of the majors in a slurred voice. "Have you come to drink with us? Join us." "All right, take it easy. I'll find Rocky and quickly escape from the clearing to Alexander. The main thing is to be polite to these young men." "Good evening. Say, have you seen a cat around here?" He ran towards the fire. "Well, mother, what are you using?" The biggest of the guys laughed. "We don't see anyone here but an old woman." "What cat? What's he doing in the woods?" "He ran away from me." Angelica tried to smile, but her eyes were drawn to a white spot in the grass, not far from the burning flames. Could it be a swan? The woman stared in silence for a moment, then decided to ask, "Who is that sitting in the grass?" "Oh, that's our dinner tonight. We caught it in the park. He was screaming like crazy. Would you like some fried swan? They say it's a delicacy." A guy standing on the sidelines suddenly started talking. "Mother, I wish you'd get out of here. I know you and your husband. Go in peace. Don't disturb me. We'll find a cat and bring it to you. You're fishing in the lower meadow by the lake, aren't you?" "Mark, what are you doing to her?" The fat man grumbled. "Let her stay with us. Let her get away. Her husband is probably sitting there looking at frogs, and the old woman is bored. Come here, chicken, we'll give you a treat, and you'll cut up a swan for us." The boy laughed and made an unmistakable gesture with his hand. "Archie, Calm your talents, said calmly Mark. Woman, go back where you came from. No, Mark, you keep your mitts down. What a leader you are. The knife will soon replace you. He'll get well and come back. The knife won't come back, Mark answered, twisting a long thread sticking out of his t-shirt on his finger. I won't let him. We've had enough adventures on our heads. Let him look for new slaves. Young people, intervened, finally, Angelica, maybe you let the poor bird go. It's suffering. And I'll bring you my cooking. Go away, woman. Your cooking is already cold. Eat it yourself, with your old man. Archie turned to the company. Guys, why don't we go and have a taste of that old bag's cooking first, and then come back and roast this lovely bird? No, Angelique pleaded. Please don't kill the animal. It hasn't done anything to you. Hear that? Mark stepped out of the shadows and crossed his arms over his chest. Who are you to be calling the shots here? Meanwhile, Rocky, trotting around looking for a missing field mouse, flew right at the company and slammed his whole body into Archie's leg. What the hell is that lump of bones? The fat mountain was genuinely surprised. The guy picked up the meowing animal and looked slyly at Angelica. She froze from fear and surprise. What will they do now, these spoiled rich people? Here, Mark, let us throw this furry one into the fire. What would happen to him? The fat man shrieked with lively interest. The others supported the fellow with whistles and shouts. No, shrieked Angelica and rushed to Archie. Mark, sensing a showdown, stood in front of Archie. His face expressed both determination and despair mixed with uncertainty. Alexander, meanwhile, was fishing. He had caught several large redfish and now glanced at the bucket occasionally, clucking his tongue in pleasure. The absence of his wife did not bother him. Angelica liked to walk alone in the woods. The old man's tranquility was interrupted by Angelica's desperate cry from the upper clearing. The old man, who had been in all sorts of fights, quickly rushed to the ford and pulled out a hunting rifle from the trunk. He checked if it was loaded. Alexander did not even remember how he climbed up the slope. He had already imagined a ferocious boar pouncing on his favorite woman, but what was his surprise when the picture of consciousness and the present did not match? There were 7 men in the clearing, all young boys. They had surrounded someone and were discussing something heatedly. Well, disperse to the sides, Alexander commanded and clicked the bolt of the gun. The crowd dispersed immediately. Grandpa, what are you doing? Drop the gun, Archie battled. Alexander only now noticed that Angelica was lying face down in the grass, her dress slightly raised. Hey, you bastards, get on your rigs and get the hell out of here, roared Alexander, swinging his weapon threateningly. Old man, take your wife and get the hell out of here. We didn't touch anyone, but yours came here and started asserting her rights. Mark glinted his eyes in the darkness. He, unlike his friends, held himself with pride and courage. Who are you to tell me what to do? Maybe you also have a gun. Alexander's eyebrows flew up. The whole elite town knew about the old man's past, and no one had ever crossed him. And here are the youngsters. Arrogant, drunken majors. I don't have a gun yet, but Knife's gonna give me his armory soon. You know who he is, don't you? I know who the hell he is. He ain't giving you nothing. Boys. Archie, meanwhile, had let go of the hissing cat. He must have had a new prank in its head. Let's shake the old man's wheelbarrow and see if the 100-year-old dust falls off. The other majors howled approvingly, some of them already headed for the path leading down. Angelica sat down on the grass and quickly lowered the hem of her dress. The screaming cat scrambled into her mistress's arms. The swan also made a sound. Its cry, like the sound of a trumpeter, cut through the silence of the forest. And Che, Mark's face stretched out and became like the image of a demon. And really, boys, his Ford is probably downstairs. Those Jews don't have any other cars. That's weird. You stole a lot of money and you can't buy something new. Halt. There was the sound of gunfire. Some of the guys crouched down, covering their heads with their hands. Archie was stunned. Mark just jerked and then froze again. What a shot. Are you crazy? One of the majors shrieked fearfully. So Alexander began quietly. His voice trembled, but the old man spoke confidently, thinking over every word. It goes like this. Now you release the poor bird, give it to us. Then you apologize to my wife. And last of all, you get on your cool cars and get out of here. Angelique was still sitting there sobbing. Alexander, I'm so scared. Come here, Angelica. Alexander gently drew the woman to him and kissed her. He was beautiful in this anger. Immediately remembered the slutty 90s as he, together with Scar, brought order to the spontaneous markets, collected taxes from sellers and shuttle traders, selling quality clothes from Turkey. And now some gang of teenagers led by a stupid boy want to show him, one of the leaders of the criminal gang, how to live. No, that's not gonna happen. Who's in charge here? He asked in a businesslike manner. The silence lasted only a few seconds. Mark stepped forward and proudly stuck out his chest. Well, me? What now? Do you have a car? Mark nodded in agreement. The guys froze in surprise. What's going to happen now? Let's make a bet. Whoever is the first with his car to arrive at the conditional place will yield. And I'll be in charge of our elite neighborhood again, just like before, and Knife will be my assistant. There was a surprised murmur in the crowd. Mark grinned crookedly. Your car will die right away. Are you sure? The grandfather asked slyly. Then let's check it out. Get your car out on the highway. Mark went to his car. The others quickly took seats in other foreign cars. Everyone was interested to see the spectacle in which an old man, a former brother, would be trampled by car wheels. Alexander also turned and headed for his car. What are you up to, you old chump? Angelica ran behind and could not hold back her anger. How are you going to compete with these teenagers? They'll overtake you in the first few seconds. Quiet, wife. Let's go faster. Don't forget your Rocky. Don't worry. Alexander got into the car. Angelica and her cat squeezed into the back seat. The guys were already waiting for them on the highway. Someone took out a cell phone, ready to film the old man's shame. Show me what you have under the hood, Alexander asked, as if he were an experienced racer. You have never seen anything like this before. Look and memorize, said Mark proudly. He opened the lid. Alexander whistled. Well done, you've put a lot of amplification. Will the car withstand such acceleration? You can be sure. When I'm the winner, you'll be my personal slave, remember. Mark smiled wryly. Deal. But when I win, you'll give me all your power and your boys. They will become my assistants. Oh, yes. And the swan too. All right then, let's see the inside of your car. I hope you haven't rusted through the lid yet. The crowd erupted in laughter. Archie threw obscene gestures and jokes in the direction of Alexander and Angelica. His wife stood nearby, hesitant to raise her eyes to look at the Ford. When the old man lifted the hood, the guys immediately fell silent. Eh? And how did it all fit here? Mark asked in surprise. You have to have a special mind. To make a racing car out of a Soviet car, the old man proudly stuck out his chest. Mark whistled. The guys were looking at the pumped-up motor with great interest. Well, let's go. Alexander asked cheerfully. Well, let's go. Mark's voice sounded less confident. Sit down, Angelica. I'll take you for a ride, said the old man to his wife. But don't be afraid. I'll strap you in and you won't even notice that you're flying at the speed of light. Come on, come on. Archie made a mark on the asphalt where the race would start. Listen, are you sure of yourself? Did you see what's under the old man's hood? He asked Mark. I did. But I'm not backing out, he said stubbornly. He checked the wheels and brakes, then nodded to Alexander. That meant the guy was ready to race. Alexander, his wife, whined in the back seat while Alexander was carefully fastening her seatbelt. You're crazy. We're going to die. It's not too late to refuse. My dear, the old man told her loudly, I won't be me if I refuse such a duel. Understand? It's a matter of principle. When the racers were in full gear, the crowd poured onto the road. Thankfully, the always busy track was empty today. It was all about making the race happen. All right, Archie shouted. His face was crimson with tension. Here we go. On the count of 1, you start warming up your engines. And on the count of 3, you move forward. The finish line is at the starting point. You get to the brickyard, and at the first fork, you turn around. Whoever gets there first is the winner. To keep the race fair, I'll personally go to the factory and make sure you don't take any shortcuts. Mark, good luck to you. Go for it. And for you, old man, I wish your tires burst at the first kilometer. The crowd hooted and jeered. Angelica prayed and wailed loudly in the back seat. The cat was yelling at the top of its lungs. Alexander, the only calm passenger in the car, smoothly turned the key. The Ford rumbled. Someone kicked the hood with force. The majors were obviously not happy that the car had started. 3, Archie shouted. "Come on, my dear," Alexander shouted joyfully. The two cars started at the same time, but the Ford slowed down noticeably before the first corner. The crowd of majors, seeing this, rejoiced and made noise. Alexander, long ago, when he worked together with Scar, remodeled his baby, made it a racing car. Angelica was not interested in men's affairs, so the woman did not even guess what kind of speed monster the rusty trowel had turned into. Alexander liked to drive together with his mentor and often won in these races. He had gained a lot of experience in this tricky business, and now the old man slowed down for a reason. "It's like running a marathon," he remembered Scar's words. "You have to stop a little at first, so that you can make a big push before the finish line. Only then will you succeed." "We will succeed," Alexander said loudly and pressed the gas pedal with force. The car, like lightning, raced toward the brickyard. Mark's car was far behind. "Oh God," Angelique screamed. "What's this doing, God? Do you like it, Angelica?" he asked excitedly. "I'll kill you at home," she yelled back. "Just as soon as we get home. You better crash now." "Len, you don't let me shake the old days." Alexander laughed and pressed the gas pedal again. Ford, with a rattle, passed the conditional marking of the finish line. The old man braked sharply. Rocky flew forward. Angelica gasped and froze. Mark's car didn't appear on the track until several minutes later. It was making a strange squealing noise. When the car pulled up, Alexander noticed that one of the wheels was oddly twisted. Mark rumbled grudgingly as he got out of his car. "Well, what?" asked him joyful Alexander. "Everything as we agreed. I won. So fulfill your promise." "What did I say?" Mark said, smiling slyly. "Did you find a fool? If it weren't for the flat tire, I'd have come first. What difference does it make?" Alexander asked the guy, surprised. "We had a deal. If I win, you give me all your company, and the Swan in addition, for re-education. Did we sign a contract with you, old man? We didn't. Come on. Make sure we don't accidentally take your carriage off its wheels. Go home and calm down." Satisfied with himself, Mark turned and walked toward the crowd. He got into Archie's car, and the others hurried to their cars. The race was over, but all was not fair. The noisy bunch of majors hurried toward town. Mark's car remained parked on the road. "I'll show you how to live by the rules." Alexander spat angrily. Angelica got out of the car and tried to console her husband, but it was all in vain. The grandfather, who had a great Oriental character, started up like a new engine. "Let's at least take the bird," Angelica said quietly. The Swan must have stayed in the clearing. These young people do not write any rules. They do what they want. They do what they damn well please. "All right, let's go and get your fishing rods and your bird. You'll think what to do with him. Swans don't live here." The husband and wife got back into the Ford. The old man was in the worst mood. Angelica knew that such a state of mind would do him no good. Rocky sullenly climbed into her lap and purred. The animal definitely did not appreciate such a race. The Swan sat obediently by the fire. The majors had tied its legs and wings with strong twine quite tightly. The bird looked at Angelica exhaustively. The animal did not even resist when the woman untied the ropes. "Good God, he has wounds on his wings. He must have lashed out and hurt himself. Those bastards. Look, wife, what I found." Alexander picked up something shiny from the grass. It was an army badge with the initials Sir Bragg of them engraved on it. Who could it be? We need to find out. They don't issue badges like that in the US. I don't understand. Guy must have served overseas. It's weird how a guy in the service got mixed up with a bunch of majors. We should get it back to whoever lost it, Angelica said firmly. "Of course. That's what we'll do," said the grandfather slowly. And in his head, he had a cunning plan to frighten the majors. Yes, so that for the rest of his life. While Angelica was gathering the cool provisions from the plate, Alexander was putting away the fishing rods with a stony face. There was no catch. They didn't often come home from fishing trips empty-handed, but today was a special occasion that knocked the old man out of his usual rut. He hadn't done his old business from the 90s for a long time, but he remembered how Schramm had dealt with those brothers who betrayed him. Alexander was even afraid sometimes of his comrades' such sophisticated methods of torture that he came up with. After such an incident with the race, it's a matter of honor. To avenge his offense, they decided to put the Swan on the back seat. The bird sat obediently next to Angelica. The woman trembling hands stroked him and whispered something to the swan. "Alexandra, let's leave him at home." "Well, at least for now. The swan's wings are bleeding. He won't survive on his own. Please." "All right," Alexander muttered. His thoughts were not at all about the wounded bird. "Just take care of him yourself. Leave me out of it." Angelica sparkled with happiness. Rocky hissed unhappily at the bird, obviously not liking the neighborhood. "I will track down this brave man who broke our treaty, and I will punish him. I won't kill him, of course, but I'll scare him so badly that he won't want to cross my path again. The main thing is that my wife won't find out and won't let me live." Alexander steadily turned the steering wheel of the car. Angelica fell asleep under the measured roar of the engine. The house appeared. There was bad weather outside. It was pouring heavy rain. "You won't go out today?" The man looked at the raindrops dripping down the dirty window frame. He put his hand under his head and thought. The recent incident on the highway with the strange old man in the Ford was on his mind. What a grandfather lives. He doesn't even look like an old man. He seems to be quite young. There's no way an old man could drive a car so skillfully. Well, or he was a race car driver back in the day. Interesting, thought Mark. He was very hungry, but there was a mouse hanging in the refrigerator. The car the man had recently taken to the shop was badly dented and made a terrible screeching noise when he drove it. He didn't want to walk to the store for groceries. Mark got up on the bed and found his cell phone. "Hello?" "Hey Archie, are you busy?" "Hi," came a sleepy voice from the receiver. "I'm actually still asleep. What do you want?" "Do you want to come with me? Grab a bite to eat." "No, I'm out. I had a little too much to drink last night. Too bad you weren't there. How's your Ariana? Did she show you around?" Mark sighed. He met a pretty girl at a rich friend's party last night. Ariana had noticed the cute guy too. Their feelings flared up briefly, and the man decided to invite the girl to his home. But when Ariana stepped over the threshold of Mark's modest dwelling, her welcoming face changed abruptly. "What kind of shack is this?" she asked irritably. Mark hugged the girl, but she pulled away. "This is my apartment." "What, you don't like it?" "That's strange. I thought you were as rich as your friends." "Well, you got something strong." Mark was surprised. Ariana seemed like a very modest girl at the party. This behavior of the girl indicated that the young lady just wanted to make money from the young major through short meetings. "You know, I don't keep alcohol at home. It's bad for your health," Mark muttered. The mood had clearly soured. Ariana noticed that. "Okay, I should probably get going. It's boring here," she smiled. "Go," Mark replied dryly. "I knew I wouldn't meet a normal girl at a party where the only people there were profiteers." But Ariana was already gone. The door slammed and the apartment was quiet. Mark gave himself his word that he would find a girl who would love him not for money and wealth. "Yes, she did," Mark answered Archie briefly. "I knew you were a male. Is she with you?" "No, she left early this morning. I was still asleep." Archie laughed. "You make sure you've got everything you need." Ariana likes to steal shiny things from other people's houses. Mark looked around with a sigh. What could be stolen? An old sofa or a chest of drawers? "All right, Archie, rest up. I'll have breakfast myself," Mark replied, trying to sound cheerful, and hummed up quickly. "It's worth a little bit of backtracking." Mark was born into a complete family and grew up alone, without brothers and sisters. His father became very ill and passed away soon after. His mother followed his father a few years later. Mark was already an adult at that time, and to his great happiness, he was not threatened with an orphanage. From his parents, Mark received an apartment in Washington. At first, the guy tried to study and work. But Mark soon abandoned his studies and had to work hard to survive in the capital. Suddenly, Mark received a summons to the army. The guy did not want to mow from the service, and money to escape from the army was nowhere to take. The guy was taken for service in the paratroopers, and in 6 months, he and his platoon were mobilized to California, a hot spot at the time, to help resolve the conflict. There Mark earned a wound and was soon returned home. The service ended, but a reminder of the terrible months of ruthless war served as an army badge with his initials, Sir Briakov Mark. After the army, it was very difficult to find a normal job in the city. Mark went to the elite neighborhoods. He hoped that the rich needed workers. And indeed, one family took the guy to them as a loader. Mark had to help the owner in the store to unload goods. The work was hard and dirty, irregular. but the owners paid well, so the guy was in no hurry to leave. That's where Mark met Archie, the pampered son of rich majors. Archie at first mocked the simple guy, but Mark was not timid either. He saw that the major collects weapons. The guy, fighting in a hot spot, learned to handle knives, guns, automatic rifles. So he gladly taught Archie to shoot. The guy spent hours at the range. Acquaintance grew into a strong friendship. Mark became a kind of family member. Archie introduced the guy to his company of young majors did not immediately accept him, but the stories of service in the army very interested them. In 6 months, Mark was already a kind of gang leader. He knew that it was necessary for the sons of the rich to frolic, to create something unusual, to shoot a cool video for his channel. Mark helped with that. After the guy had raced with the old man in a Ford and then refused to fulfill the terms of the contract, Archie and his company respected Mark even more. To them, feelings of responsibility, duty, honor were alien. Mark, of course, felt uncomfortable bullying the older man, but he had no right to act otherwise. The rich majors would stop accepting him, and he would become a beggar again. Poverty was what Mark feared most of all. The man got out of bed and stretched. No, this is impossible. Why did it start raining only when it was urgent to go out? Well, you could call a food delivery service, but you have to shell out a lot of money for delivery. In the pocket of the jacket should be a business card. The other day a man went for new jeans in the hypermarket, and one very pretty teenage girl slipped him a card with an advertisement for food delivery. Here it was. On one side was a picture of a pink flamingo standing on one leg and looking off into the distance. On the other side was an address and a contact number. Flamingo won't let you starve to death. The slogan read, "Well, let's see what they have on the menu," Mark said thoughtfully and went to the computer. But then his intentions were interrupted by the loud ringing of his cell phone. It was Archie. "Did you change your mind?" Mark asked cheerfully. "No," he mumbled. "I'm calling you because I got locked out of my house this morning by that grandfather who threatened us with a gun in the clearing." Mark fell silent. Strange. What does this weirdo want again? Maybe he wants to race some more. And what did he want? Archie was silent for a few seconds, then said abruptly, "He found your badge in the clearing. He wants to get it back." "No way," Mark replied thoughtfully. "I always carried it in my breast pocket. How could it have fallen out?" "I don't know," replied the friend, "but my grandfather refused to give it to me. He wants to meet you in person. Anyway, I gave him your phone number and you'll figure it out. Bye." There were short beeps in the phone, which meant that the conversation was over. Mark put down his cell phone and went into the hallway. He searched the pockets of his jacket for a long time, but the token was nowhere to be found. So after all, he lost it, the man said to himself in confusion. How could he do that? To lose the most precious thing. Mark went back into the hallway and frantically checked his pockets. Phew, the photo of his mother was still there. The man grieved for a very long time after the death of the dearest person. The photo of his mother always reminded him that her soul was somewhere near, protecting his son from problems and danger. Mark carefully kissed the tattered photo and hid it in his breast pocket. The phone rang long in the hall. What a morning. I should have slept all day and turned off my cell phone. Strange, an unfamiliar number. Hello, Mark shouted irritably. There was dense silence in the receiver. I'm listening to you, repeated the man. Are you deaf or what? Remember me? Suddenly a hoarse voice sounded sharply. We had a race with you. You also sent me away then. Ah, it's you, Grandpa? What do you want from my badge? I know you have it. I'll meet you at that forest clearing. Tomorrow night, we'll have a man-to-man talk there. Okay, Mark replied. Let's do it at 8 o'clock sharp. The connection was cut off at the other end. Old bore, you want adventure at the end of your life. You're bored with life. Well, nothing. We'll see what he's up to. Mark smiled to himself. Such mystery and the place of meeting even turned the guy on, inflamed his imagination. Mark decided to do more mundane things and went to look at the delivery menu. Meanwhile, Alexander sat at home, in a soft armchair and had breakfast. Angelica had prepared an excellent omelet, which was impossible not to eat. The cat lazily jumped on the windowsill and looked at the gray wall of rain. Yes, I wanted to clean the yard today, but the flower bed's in order, grumbled unhappily Angelica. Wife, don't grumble, Alexander said cheerfully, devouring the second portion of omelet. Go and read a book or embroider. Have a rest. The doorbell rang. Strange. Angelica was surprised. Who could come in such bad weather? Alexandra, yours. Mine, the old man rubbed his palms, go upstairs. It's not a woman's business to listen to men's secrets. Watch me, threatened Angelica with a finger. I'll find out that again you are robbing. Alexander got up from the chair and hugged his wife. Do not worry, my love. I've long been away from it. Just men bored at home came to me and backgammon to play. Angelica waved her hand, smiled, and went up the steep steps to the second floor. Alexander jogged across the huge hallway and opened the door. On the doorstep stood his old friends, Steve and Mickey. Hi, why are you chasing us in this weather? Steve asked grudgingly. Mickey, meanwhile, deftly took off his soaked jacket and carried it into the bathroom to hang it on the dryer. That's a case, Alexander said quietly and put his finger to his lips, but not to anyone. This is our secret case for the three of us. Old man, have you decided to go back to the past? Well, I'll tell you that it's not the 90s anymore. Even the local police used to be afraid of us, but now they'll put their hands behind your back if you take a wrong turn. It's a matter of honor. Don't just stand on the doorstep. Come in. Take off your boots. Is your wife scrubbing the floors for you? Steve, meanwhile, had come back from the bathroom. He was standing by the fireplace, warming his hands with pleasure. It's not even fall yet, but it's so cold, he wondered. Well, come on, tell me about it. Mickey and Steve were practically the same age as Alexander. They met when they were all working for Scar. A strong friendship developed. Their wives were friends too. I've already told you what happened to Angelica and me in that unfortunate clearing. Alexander began, as his friends settled into the warm, soft armchairs around the fireplace. Yes, it was. Mickey smiled wryly. The flames from the fireplace danced in his pupils. But what do you want now? Do you want revenge? Brother, you know the law of the boomerang. That brat hurt me badly and wanted to abuse my wife with his gang. Isn't that proof enough for you? If you don't want to help me, I won't force you. Go home. Steve will be enough for me. Well, don't get too excited. I just swore to my wife and children that I would no longer decide who lives and who dies. Steve nodded in agreement. He always listened for a long time and then spoke. No one is going to kill anyone. Alexander shouted and was immediately afraid of his own shout. Angelica could hear it. The old man listened for a minute, but the second floor was quiet. Apparently, his wife had dozed off. Then he continued in a whisper. I want to scare him. Remember what Scar did to us. Steve raised his bushy eyebrows in surprise. You want to stick this guy in a trunk and keep him there like an animal, then drive him into the thicket and let him out? Yes, answered Alexander innocently. I was badly offended, and Lena was also tried to rape. So an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I don't know, said Mickey quietly. I don't want to go to jail for kidnapping in my old age. So you'll just help me catch him and put him in the trunk. I'll take care of the rest. Wait a minute, Steve. You don't want a guy to suffer in the trunk of your rusty truck. You can't even stay in there for an hour. Either you help me or you walk away and forget about our friendship. We'd have always defended our honor and pride together. And now there are two fat bastards sitting in front of me, afraid to even move a leg. Alexander got up from his chair and went to the window. Well, if we can hide our faces so we can't be seen, Steve began, we can help. Yeah, Mickey mumbled. Alexander turned around excitedly. I knew you were real friends. We'll talk about it now. The main thing is not to tell your wives. We'll make up an excuse for our absence. The three old men gathered around the table again and began to discuss the plan of action in whispers. It was only after midnight when Angelica decided to please the guests with her special fish pie. The next day the rain did not hurry to leave the city. On the contrary, the downpour turned into a tedious and monotonous rain. The only thing that pleased the eye was the lush greenery, which had revived after a long heat wave. The foliage hung with pleasure in the light breeze. Alexander sat in the kitchen and twirled a cup with cool tea in his hands. Yesterday with his friends they had thought over a plan of action to educate the young and insolent guy. Now it was only necessary to wait for the agreed time. Lately the swan, which Angelica called Baron, was able to walk around the house, proudly raising his head. Poor Rocky was locked up in one of the rooms. The bird and the cat did not want to be friends. Delighted with the swan's recovery, Angelica ran after the bird and collected droppings all over the house. Now Baron proudly came out of the corner and approached Alexander in search of a treat. Well, you insolent creature, the old man crumpled. Hold the cookie. The swan quickly swallowed a piece of cookie and nodded gratefully. Angelica came down from the second floor. She was in good spirits today, despite the rain. Alexander, you have thought of everything so well. It's been ages since I sat with my friends and had a heart-to-heart talk with them. I've been so busy. Are you going to Steve's tonight? Alexander smiled and nodded. Good. I'm off to pick out my outfit. The woman smiled and walked briskly back. Her loud, melodious singing sounded from the room. If you had known what kind of party you were going to go to, you would have eaten your brains out with a tablespoon long ago, Alexander muttered and gave the swan some more cookies. That's it, go. You can't eat too much flour. My wife will scold me for spoiling her, he smiled. The Baron shouted understandingly and went into the living room. Yes, you haven't shit there yet, the old man shouted after the bird. Nothing, your mom will clean up after you. Time dragged on like hot caramel slowly and tediously. At 8:30, there was a noise of a car outside the gate. They're here. A few minutes later, the house was filled with a buzz. Women in bright dresses and expensive makeup swooped on Angelica like magpies. The wife was glowing with happiness, which couldn't be said for the men. The three friends were silent. Well, said Alexander, I leave you the most valuable thing, my wife. Have fun to the fullest. We'll go too. Angelica kissed her husband. She was already bustling around the table with bottles, plates, flowers from the flower bed. Steve, Mickey, and Alexander left the house together. I'd rather stay in the company of women tonight, Mickey muttered and looked up at the sky. It's gray and boring. You're like a woman yourself. Steve clapped his friend on the shoulder. Alexander, shall we go in your car? Yeah, I've got everything ready. Steve looked at the trunk and clucked his tongue. What's with the guns? Well, you never know. He's gonna attack. We'll have to be on the safe side. In the trunk, in addition to the gun, there was a water bottle, thick ropes, duct tape, and black hats with eye holes. I never thought I'd be doing this again in my old age, Mickey muttered as Alexander pulled out of the garage. It was cramped and stuffy in the car. Open a window. You could suffocate. It's okay. Now we'll drive with the wind, Alexander consoled his friend. Steve turned on the stereo. The car was filled with the sounds of an orchestra. It's more fun that way, he replied, embarrassed. The road to the meadow was quite beautiful. On both sides of the road were thick birch and maple trees. It seemed that you were moving in some mystical tunnel. Gradually, it was getting darker. There was not a single star in the sky. Rain fell in lonely drops on the car window. Alexander occasionally turned on the windshield wipers to remove the moisture and clean the glass. It's a good thing there won't be any clouds tonight, Mickey whispered quietly. Steve nudged his comrade in the side. Both fell silent. It should go well. I'll keep the kid locked up for a few days and let him out. At least he'll know not to mess with old people. Alexander tried to look cheerful, but he was not very good at it. Anxiety was growing in his heart. There was no telling what this major was up to. Maybe a knife blade would glitter in his hand, and the three friends would bid farewell to life forever. Or maybe he'll ambush them too. We don't know. The trail loomed ahead. The four drove briskly into the wet mud. The car was not afraid of such a road. Alexander passed the swampy area without obstacles and turned out on a familiar place. No one. The old man looked at his watch. It was still quite early. He was in too much of a hurry, driving fast. We'll sit and wait, Steve said, putting on his hat. Mickey quickly followed him and also pulled on a black cloth with slits for eyes and mouth. You look funny, Alexander said cheerfully, looking in the rearview mirror. Oh, look, there's someone under the tree, Steve said, looking into the distance. Alexander looked ahead too. A little to the right of the forest road, there was a big maple tree. Someone was hiding under it. He's here. Go to him, Mickey muttered, and we'll join him later as agreed. Steve, get out of the car. We've got to put on a nice little circle to get in the back. Dan rain. There's already water in my boots from the swamp. While Steve enjoyed cursing the weather, Alexander fumbled in his pocket for a metal token. A fine lure. Grandfather had been fishing for years and he was a pro at it. His friends marveled every time the man brought back a huge catfish or pike in a net. It will be the same kind of fishing. Only the bait is different and the fish are not fish at all, flew a silly thought in his head. Alexander resolutely opened the door. Mark had been boy and looked at him. The experienced eye of the former brother was searching for suspicious folds in his clothes. Had the major accidentally brought a weapon with him? Mark was silent. He only now realized that he was standing all alone in front of this strange old man in the forest. Various thoughts were swarming in his head. Where to run to if there was no car? Why hadn't he borrowed from Valerka one of the pistols from his huge collection? How come he had no friends with him? Why don't you say something? Didn't you learn to say hello to your elders? Alexander smiled. He took a token out of his pocket and waved it in front of the boy. Mark did not even see that two dark figures crossed the evening glade and disappeared behind the bushes. Hello, old man. What do you want for that token? You didn't just come here to give it away, did you? Alexander nodded. You don't know at all who you're messing with. Strange. Your major friends know, but you don't. Didn't they enlighten you? You're standing in front of a criminal mastermind who used to run this whole village and build people like you. So proud and arrogant, who don't know the meaning of manhood. I've never lived in this village, Mark shrugged. I work here for the owners. Sorry, I don't know who you are. So proudly sticking out its chest, Alexander continued, you humiliated me in front of your gang of rich and stupid freaks, and I want you to apologize to me in their presence. Mark's eyes widened. Are you out of your mind, old man? I'm not apologizing to you. Look for the fools. Suddenly the bushes nearby stirred, and two shadows hung over the guy. One low and broad, the other long and skinny. Mark tried to scream, but his mouth was shut. Tie him up, someone shouted in a bass voice. The last thing the boy heard was Alexander's commanding voice. Put him in the trunk. Careful, don't hurt his head. Hurry up. The shadows were arguing. The voices were unrecognizable. Mark lost consciousness for a moment. The car was bouncing on the bumps. We had to hurry. It would soon be night. The wides must not guess where their wides were. Alexander pressed the gas pedal hard, and the old Ford sped towards Steve's house. The old man drove Mickey and Steve home, and they said goodbye, promising to keep quiet. Upon reaching his house, Alexander saw lights in the windows. There was music playing loudly. That's good. They won't hear it if he yells, the old man thought. He drove the car into the garage and turned off the engine, listened to the sounds, then walked forward and opened the trunk. Mark lay there with no sign of life. The old man carefully checked his pulse and exhaled with relief. Alive. His mouth was tightly taped shut. His hands and feet were bound with twine. Alexander locked the trunk and left the garage. Now it will be necessary to play an exemplary grandfather, so that no one noticed that he was hiding something. Nothing, but at least one major will be re-educated. Yes, so that the guy will disappear the desire to argue with the elders. Alexander went into the house. Angelica and her friends were sitting at the table. All were already tipsy. My husband has arrived. The woman shouted cheerfully. Come here, sit down with us. You know, my dear, I'll even drink today. Alexander replied. The burning liquid warmed the body, and the head felt a little lighter. The old man helped his wife to call a cab for her friends. When the house was quiet, Angelica exhaled and plopped down on the small divan in the living room. You know, she said, it turns out Lucy and Steve are going to the Maldives for a month. They've already bought the tickets. Lucy was showing me pictures of what she's gonna wear to the beach. Despite her age, she's got a great figure. And I'm a mess. You are my most beautiful, hugged his wife Alexander, and you do not need any liposuction and injections of youth. Your Lucy cannot accept the fact that she is already 65. Alexander, promise me, blurred eyes Angelica looked at her husband. Promise that we will also fly to an island. I've never been abroad. All we did was drive around the USA. Lucy and Steve have traveled halfway around the world. I envy them. Of course we'll fly, Alexander said warmly, but we'll have to choose where to go. The main thing is not to be caught red-handed by the cops. Angelica quickly fell asleep in Alexander's arms. Her husband carefully covered her with a plate and went to the dining room to clean the table. He rinsed the plates and wiped the table. He put the set back in its place. He stood for a while, assessing the results of his labor. Then he left the house and headed for the garage. The car stood in total darkness, glinting with headlights. The old man opened the trunk. Mark was lying with his eyes open. When he saw Alexander, he twitched and mumbled. Come on, be quiet. Calm down, you will not succeed. Stay a little in the trunk. Maybe it'll clear your head a little. God willing, it'll all come out. The old man rummaged in Mark's pockets and pulled out a cell phone. The device was password protected. All right, the old man grumbled. I don't need to go through your cell phone. Let it stay at my place. Alexander closed the trunk and went into the house. His wife was asleep. He looked at the clock. It was already past midnight. He lay down on the bed next to Angelica. She hugged him and snoozed peacefully again. Sleep stubbornly did not come. Alexander stared at the shadows that lined up on the wall in a bizarre pattern. And the wind made them move. The branches of the trees created their wonderful theater of shadows. How can I sleep, Lord? I've never felt such remorse before. And now I just feel like an executioner, he thought, putting one hand behind his head. Angelica woke up and stared sleepily at her husband. Alexander, why are you awake? I don't feel like it. Sleep doesn't come to me in any way, he mumbled in reply. Take a sleeping pill, advised his wife. Yeah, sleep, my dear, sleep. I'll be right there. He got up, put on his robe. His wife was already dozing. Alexander quietly went out into the corridor. There was a sepulchral silence in the house. The Baron slept on his perch by the fireplace in the living room. The old man tiptoed past the bird. To wake the swan is not worth it. You will raise such a scream that not only Angelica, but part of the village will wake up. It was a bright night outside. Despite the cold rain, which had been pouring for several days in a row, it was quite warm. The large puddles had managed to dry up a little. Alexander walked up to the garage in his slippers. He kept thinking that Mark's screaming was about to come out of it. He couldn't stand it any longer and went into the small room again. Ford, the pride of more than one generation, stood, gleaming round headlights. Not a single sound. Alexander leaned over the trunk and whispered, "Be patient for a while, and I'll let you out. Don't scream and don't try to run. And don't try to tell anyone. You know, there are many quiet ravines." I stood again, listening to the perfect silence. He couldn't bear to lift the heavy lid. Beating eyes stared at him. The boy was crying. "Why are you doing this?" Alexander was sincerely surprised. "You were so brave. And here you are crying like a girl. If you're already going to the end, then go." The guy mumbled and pointed at his jeans. They were wet. "Wow, I didn't think of a restroom for a guy," thought the old man frustratedly. Something had to be decided. Alexander spat angrily, closed the trunk with a clatter, and got behind the wheel. He drove for a long time. It was starting to get light. Here I got into trouble, irritated old man said to himself. Such an idea to close the kid in the trunk for the fact that he just stumbled. Old asshole. The car turned off the road and drove onto a dirt path. Alexander kept his course toward the forest thicket. It was the first time he had seen these thickets. By the way, the old man had long ago left the borders of the region and drove into an unknown village. The forest was thick and overgrown. Alexander stopped at a small clearing. He stood for a few more minutes just like that. He listened to the barking of dogs, the noise of trees. Not a soul was around. Only the moon illuminated the grass, the leaves, and the car. Alexander sighed, walked to the trunk, and opened it. The boy's face begged for mercy. "I wanted to keep you much longer, of course," Alexander began, looking straight into Mark's eyes, but took pity. "I can't watch you ruin my trunk anymore. Anyway, you could be glad I'm letting you go. But my main condition is that you don't know me, you haven't seen me, and you haven't been in my trunk. Understand?" Mark nodded. A tear ran down his dusty face like a rivulet. "All right, if you so much as mention this to anyone, you're on your own. I'll kill you, but I'll find your ugly little soul. You see my friends? They'll help too, you can be sure of that. Now I'm gonna untie you quietly. Go away. By the way, we're a long way from our village, about 50 kilometers away. Look for ways to get home on your own." Alexander took out a knife and carefully cut the ropes first on his hands, then on his feet. Mark pulled the duct tape off his face with a groan. "Hold your badge and cell phone," Alexander mumbled. The guy nodded silently and took the items. He carefully slipped the cell phone and token into the breast pocket of his jacket. Suddenly, a crumpled photo flew out of there. "You dropped it." Grandpa carefully picked up the black and white photo. On it was someone very familiar. Eyes, lips, affectionate smile, hands. "Where did you get this picture?" wailed Alexander. His mother, Selena, was looking at him from the photo. "I've always had it," the boy said quietly. "Why? Where did you get it from?" Alexander's face stretched. As if from the distant past, his mother stood before the old man, crying in front of the airplane ramp. and below lay his sisters in a pool of blood. In the distance, his father fell to his knees with a confused face. Near him lay the ill-fated machine gun. This is a picture of my mother. She gave it to me when I was a teenager. I've kept it with me ever since. My mother is dead, but the memory of her is with me always. I don't believe it, Alexander said firmly. It's my mother, Selena. She and I ran away from California, then lived with my grandparents. Then she went to visit the volunteer who saved us then and disappeared. That volunteer is my father, Mark said quietly. There was a fog in his head. Even. And I'm Mark. My mom used to tell me that she came to visit my dad when she was very young. She didn't tell me she still had kids. I guess she didn't want to, but she used to call someone and cry a lot. I was born when my mom was over 40. My parents were very fond of me, loved me equally well, but they both died too soon. I was already an adult, so I did not go to an orphanage, but stayed in my apartment. Good God, Alexander exclaimed. How did you end up here, in an elite neighborhood? I was looking for a job, that's all, simply answered Mark. I got a job as a loader for a rich major. Unloaded groceries. Met Archie. So what? So you're my little brother? Mark smiled shyly. I guess I am. You're my maternal brother. I'm sorry, the old man's heart couldn't take it. I didn't know. You hurt me so much after the race that I wanted to teach you a little lesson. But I swear I'd never do that to my own brother. Tell me, was your mom even happy with your dad even? I mean, my grandmother told me that my mom ran away from home with some scoundrel. And I believed it. Can you believe it? Honestly, I hadn't heard a word about you, Mark said thoughtfully. But if I had, I wouldn't have wasted a minute looking for you. I have no one but my parents. I'm alone in life. Alexander suddenly smiled. He sat down on a stump and covered his face with his hands. What an accident that brought us together. Mark stood next to him. He hadn't quite realized everything that was happening in his life yet. The guy just got over the fact that he was tied up and locked in the trunk, and here, it turns out that the one who tied him up is the most dear person. Alexander wiped away a stingy male tear. You know what, Mark? Get in the car. Where are you going? The boy asked. The fear was gradually receding. Let's go, Alexander corrected him, to our house. I'll introduce you to my wife. If you want, you can live with us. There's plenty of room, enough for everyone. You'll be for your brother, and for the son of your children God didn't give you. By the way, remember that swan your gang of majors we're going to fry. He lives at our house. Let's go. Change your clothes, have a decent meal. Tell me about your life. The old man came up to Mark and hugged him affectionately. The Ford hummed pleasantly again. Mark sat down on the seat. Alexander, smiling, pressed the gas pedal. They drove toward the sunrise. The men only now noticed that it was morning. Alexandra, Mark began softly. You can call me brother, the grandfather smiled. What did you want to ask? Tell me, how did you get it into your head to convert this car into a race car? Alexander clucked his tongue with pleasure. He liked talking about his Ford more than anything else. Well, it was a young thing. In the 90s, we did whatever we wanted. I got the car from my grandfather. It became my favorite piece of machinery. I didn't even want to trade it in for something better. It was a betrayal to me. My partner helped me stuff the car with all the gas pedals and we started racing. If I'm gone someday, don't sell the Ford, you can have it. It's a good, solid car. What are you doing? Mark smiled. We'll race with you again, brother. The car disappeared into the morning fog. Only its pleasant murmur could be heard. A new day was beginning. A new era, full of unknowns and gifts of fate, was beginning.
Oh, Selena, look how handsome John is, Betty told her friend. She was 6 months pregnant herself. Spit, her friend looked at her. Laughed Betty. That's good. The girl lifted her son in her arms and kissed him. You're so superstitious. Betty always knew that. God protects him, Selena said. They had been friends since high school, and now that they had both graduated and married, one was already a mother and the other was just getting ready. Where are they? Betty looked at her watch. I don't know, they should be here by now, she shrugged. Today was their special day. It was on this date that Betty and Selena had met their husbands. Yes, Harry and Carlos were friends. They'd been walking the streets of the city like girls, and apparently, as fate would have it, they'd met two friends. Since then, exactly 5 years had passed. They played weddings 1 month apart. At first, they wanted it to be on the same day, but then the girls changed their minds. And today they gathered to celebrate a small anniversary of their acquaintance, waiting only for their husbands. Are they knocking? Betty looked at her friend when she heard a sound. I don't know, go look. Carlos has keys. She looked toward the front door. Betty got up and went to open it. Indeed, there were young men standing on the landing with so many bags in their hands that they couldn't even knock properly. Wow, Harry, she can feel you even through the doors. Carlos looked at his friend. Come on, we were just scraping by. They entered the apartment. Where are you going? The girls looked at the huge bags. Now we'll get everything ready and sit at the table. Her husband did not answer her question. And he and Carlos really went into the kitchen, closed the doors, told the wives to wait a little. They looked at each other and quietly went into the room. That's the way it always was. Betty and Selena were very good guys. They were always in charge. The wives just had to be there for them and love them. Well, that was it. An hour later, Harry came out of the kitchen. He and his friend had dragged a large table to the middle of the room and began carrying the dishes they had just prepared themselves onto it. Boys, did you really do all this yourselves? Betty marveled at it every time. Enough already. Her husband kissed her on the cheek. They sat down at the table. Everything looked delicious. Carlos poured wine into glasses. We thought of you too. The young man smiled and pulled another bottle from under the table. You what? I'm nursing and Beatty's pregnant. Selena told him immediately. It's non-alcoholic, hubby parried. Good, then let's have it. She set up 2 glasses. It was so family-friendly. The friends sat around, reminiscing about everything they had, how they met, what they talked about, and the rest. I feel sick. Betty covered her mouth with the palm of her hand. Hurry up. Harry took her hand. She didn't return to the table again. In the evening, the couple went home. I don't believe there is such a friendship, Betty said to her husband in the evening. How can it be? Because we have one. He looked surprised. Yes, I realized that, but still, she was silent. But it was true. In all the years of their friendship, neither the boys among themselves, nor the girls, nor their families had ever quarreled. There had been a few misunderstandings, but never a big fight. Are you going out? Selena called her friend. I can't, it's my stomach, she admitted. You need to go to the hospital, the girl worried. She was silent, counting what Betty's due date was. I'd already thought about it, but I want to wait for Caustic, she said, but she was in pain. When are you due? Selena finally asked. In 3 days, clutched Betty. She was already sitting down. It hurt so much. Urgently, call an ambulance, her friend advised. Okay, there was silence on the other end of the phone. BT, Selena shouted, but there was silence in response. The girl crouched down in the hallway. She could hear her name being called from the tube, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't even inhale or exhale. The pain was so intense. A key was inserted into the keyhole. The girl turned around. Harry entered the apartment. He was in a good mood. He saw his wife on the floor. Everything immediately changed. He realized that he needed to go to the hospital. Now, love, 1 minute. He ran to the phone and dialed 911. Help! She held out her hand to him, but he didn't. He just walked over and lifted her into his arms. Everything was ready. All that was left was to wait for the paramedics. They arrived. Harry carried his wife to the car. They took her to the hospital. The young man wanted to go with them, but they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him in the hospital anyway. She was already in the labor room. There were doctors all around. Come on, honey, soon you'll be a mom, the midwife commanded her. There was a baby crying in the room. Betty looked at the baby and cried too. She was now the mother of the most beautiful baby girl. Lucy, she took her tiny hand as she lay on her chest. Congratulations, the doctor whispered in her ear. Thank you, the girl lay there, somewhere in the distance, still feeling the pain that had just been so intense that it hurt to even remember. After that, she was transferred to the ward, and Harry was already standing outside the window, waiting for his daughter to be shown to him. Look, it's your daddy. She brought the little bundle to the window, and my husband just cried. He shouted words of gratitude and wiped his tears. That made 6 of us. Her friends and her husband greeted her after she was discharged. Yes, we'll become relatives, laughed the girl's mother. I don't mind, Carlos said. They went home and decided to organize a small table. Lucy was a quiet child. After she was fed, she fell asleep and let her parents spend a few hours with their friends. John was a little over a year old. The boy was curious about who was brought in and put in the crib. He stood looking at his future girlfriend. "Why, Lucy?" Selena asked. "I don't know," looked at her and realized that's what she was going to be called. Betty turned to her husband. "It's okay. It's a great name." He kissed her hands. After a brief sit-down, the friends left, leaving the young parents alone with the baby. Lucy was growing up, as on the first day she was very quiet, not crying much, only at night when it was feeding time. Now Selena and Betty were walking together in the park with their strollers. "We should get together," Selena suggested. Yes, her friend agreed with her. They were visiting with Betty and Harry. The friends were sitting on the couch watching John and Lucy discussing something on their own. The girl was still so young that she was babbling incomprehensible things, but the boys seemed to understand everything. Let them grow up together, and then they'll be together too. Carlos couldn't get enough of the children's play. "I don't mind," Selena said, just as she had at the maternity ward. "Neither do we," Harry turned to her. That's how the boys grew up, always close by. John went to daycare late. He was practically 3 years old. Betty had tried to find a place for Lucy too. Now the boy and the girl were in the same garden. Their mothers picked them up every day, and they walked home together. When it was time to go to school, Selena would not put John with her stream. They waited a year, and the kids walked to September 1 together. "We did it," cheered the moms as their kids walked to class with their teacher. Yes, they hugged. From that moment on, John and Lucy became inseparable. They sat at the same desk, went everywhere together. They were even teased as bride and groom. "How are you doing at school?" a mother would ask her daughter when she got home. "Not you, but you," the girl told her. She was in the 7th grade. "Good. How are you doing in school?" smiled the woman. She was pleased that they had once made the right choice. John was sticking up for Lucy now. He loved her and would never let her get hurt. "Everything is fine. Today I talked to Selena. He said that after school we'll get married right away," blushed the girl. "Where are you in a hurry ahead of the whole life?" Did not understand the mother, but did not have anything against it. They gathered with friends, the children together, they too. "You know what my daughter said to me today?" They were sitting around the table again. "We know. John pleased us too," laughed Selena. The husbands looked at each other. They too were supportive of the children. School was going great. The boy and girl didn't have to run anywhere. They often spent time at home. "Exams are coming up. Have you prepared?" Betty came into the room. "Of course," turned at the same time, guys. "Good, I believe in you." She walked out and they were alone again. At prom, everyone was together again. "Remember standing here with you when our boys went to 1st grade, whispered Selena to Betty. "Of course, it seems like yesterday to me." The woman brushed away a tear. "And now we're already seeing them off," sighed the other. "Nothing. I believe that everything will be fine." Their husbands joined them. That's how it was. When the official part was over and the graduates went to greet the dawn, John asked for silence on the bus. Everyone looked at him in surprise and fell silent. "Lucy," he knelt in the aisle by her seat, "will you marry me?" The classmates applauded. Some started whistling and hooting. "Of course I will." She hugged him and took the ring. John stood up. He hugged Lucy. Ever since he was a little boy, this boy knew that she would be his one and only and his favorite. They reached the place. Everything was calm and Jacoptic. The boys separated from the big company and spent time alone. "Look," showed the girl the ring to her mom in the morning. "Guys, why in silence? Why did not tell us anything?" She took Lucy's hand and looked closer at the jewelry. "I do not know," John so decided. "Probably today we will gather," modestly answered the daughter. "Okay, I'll go call Selena." The mother walked down the hallway and smiled. Everything was just as they wanted it to be. The families gathered together. They congratulated their children and rejoiced that they would soon be relatives. "Well, shall we go?" Lucy looked at her lover. It was only a few days before their wedding and they had a lot to do. "Yes," nodded the boy. Everyone was busy with business. Lucy had taken her entrance exams only a week ago. John hadn't joined her. He was due to serve in the army. The wedding was in the last days of August. After that, Lucy started to prepare for her studies. John received a summons. It was not very happy news, but the guy did not show any sign. "How am I here without you?" She snuggled up to her husband in the evening. They were sitting at home in front of the TV. "Lucy, you're at it again." He was nervous. "What's the big deal if I'm worried?" She looked up at her lover. "You think I'm not worried?" They talked about it every day, so the topic got a little tiresome. John, for some time before the draft, came to the same city where the girl studied. He didn't want to live away from his wife. "Will you come with me? Or by the weekend we'll be at your parents'?" asked her boyfriend, when before his departure was only a few days. "Of course, I will go." She did not understand his question, because she loved him so much that she was ready to go to the army. The girl wrote a statement so that she would not be lost in her studies. The reason was serious, so no one would not interfere. Selena and Betty were crying. The fathers just kept silent. Friends gathered around the table, all raising their glasses and doing something. Dismissed early, Lucy and John went into the room. "Will you wait?" He looked at the girl. "Why do you ask?" "Of course, yes." She kissed him. Tears rolled down from her eyelashes by themselves. Lucy couldn't help it. In the morning at the train station, she stood and stared blankly at the departing train. "Don't worry, daughter. Time will pass quickly. We will support you." Her mother-in-law hugged her. "Thank you." She turned away and walked away. Now the girl wanted only one thing: to go with her head into study, to do something, only if the hours and weeks would pass faster. "Daughter, maybe you should move temporarily to a dormitory. Why spend money on rented accommodation?" Her mother asked her. "Yes, I also thought about it. There are girls there. Everything will not be so sad in the evenings. Lucy has already packed things for the move." "Good, you're a good girl." The woman hugged her. John wrote often. In his letters he described where he was, what they were doing there. Lucy answered him with the same frequency. "Why are you always sitting here like a mouse in a hole?" The roommate came in after a walk. "I'm studying." She pointed to her notes. "I'm also studying, but you don't need to wave your hand at yourself. Come with us tomorrow. You'll have a good time," she suggested to her. "I don't know what my husband will say." She looked at the sealed envelope that was to be sent tomorrow. "I think he'll be all for it." Julia sat down on her bed. "Okay, we'll see tomorrow," Lucy agreed. The next day in the evening, she and a few other girls went for a walk around town. They decided to sit for a while in the recreation area, which was in the very center. There was a fountain, of course. At this time of year it was not working, and a few benches, their girlfriends, and occupied. "Why did you get married so early?" Julia asked the girl. "I don't know. John wanted it that way," she answered. "It is clear that nothing is clear," she laughed. Lucy heard the girl and looked around. She didn't know who knew her. "Archie," she saw her classmate. "How are you here?" He came over, with a few other kids with him. "I'm studying." "Why are you here and not in the army?" "John's gone." She motioned for the boy to sit down. "And I got in. I have a deferment." He looked at the girls. He remembered that he was not alone. "I see. But my husband didn't want to," she said sadly. "Oh yes, he's your husband." Archie remembered the proposal and the wedding. Yes, she noticed that the young men had approached the girls and were now getting acquainted. "There's nothing to be bored of," the young man said cheerfully. "Come with us. It'll be fun." "It probably won't work tonight." Lucy turned to Julia, looking to her for support. "Why not? The time is still childish. We'll have time for everything." The neighbor was already sitting next to the guy. "Okay." The girl was not worried. Archie was a normal guy. He would not give her offense. That evening they went to the young men's apartment. They rented it for everyone. The guys quickly organized the table. Funny dishes started to appear on it. Wine, melted cheese, bread, leftover sausage, buns, student kit. "I'm so glad I met you today," served Archie a glass of Lucy's red liquid. "I won't." She pushed the container away with her hand. "Come on, here's to introductions," he insisted. The girl looked at the others. Everyone was having fun. They were already drinking heavily. Well, she took the glass. Archie raised his own. They silently touched, and Lucy took a sip. She had tasted champagne once before, when they had been married, so she didn't like the tart liquid. The girl wanted to put the glass on the table, but the guy didn't let her do it. In the evening, when it was already very dark outside the window, Lucy and Archie sat in a small room on his bed. The girl's head was spinning. She was smiling. "Lucy, do you know how much I loved you at school?" he whispered in her ear, hugging her himself. "Archie, I'm married." She pulled his hands away. "I know, and I'm not saying anything, but my husband's not around." His breath tickled her neck. It was funny. I'm not like that," she said in a slurred voice. "Okay, I can wait." He kissed her cheek, then stood up, helped her up. "Maybe we'll go to the dorm. We have school tomorrow." She saw Julia making out with one of the guys. "Do you want me to walk you out?" Archie asked her. Yeah, she wasn't going to stay here. They reached the dormitory without adventure. Archie hugged Lucy on the steps. "I'll come back tomorrow. We'll go for a walk," he told her, his face so close it looked like he was going to kiss her. Lucy herself doesn't know what was wrong with her at that moment, but she wanted it. Archie touched her lips gently and let go. She walked into the building, went up to her room, lay in bed, and instantly fell asleep. In the morning, she walked to class and remembered what had happened yesterday. Why she acted like that, what she was missing. It was embarrassing. She had only met Julia at school, and she was cheerful. "Are you going to the guys today?" she asked her friend. No, the girl didn't want to. But no one considered her opinion. Archie came to pick her up in the evening. He was waiting for her on watch while she got ready. All day long, the girl knew she wasn't going anywhere in the evening. But as soon as she was told that a young man had come, she gladly began to get ready. "Hi," she walked out to him. "What took you so long? It's like a date," he laughed, and they walked outside. Lucy liked walking next to the strong and handsome Archie. Of course, she had no feelings for him, just friends. But the guy didn't understand that. He perceived her behavior as if she was flirting with him, and she'd agreed to go out. "Archie, why?" He brought her a huge bouquet of flowers. "I just like to make you feel good." He hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. In her letters to John, Lucy never said a word about being in a relationship. They also corresponded, confessed their love to each other. Lucy wrote that she was waiting for him. And the new friend kept coming, bringing gifts, flowers, inviting her on dates, which Lucy took for simple meetings. "Are you ready?" He came for her again. Yes, she came out to him. It was already warm outside, so it was possible to spend time somewhere in a summer cafe. "Lucy, I care about you." The young man took her hand. "Archie, why, you know everything." She lowered her eyes and took his hand away. "Perhaps your love with John is all far-fetched," he told her. "That's enough. I'm going home." She still wouldn't look him in the eye. "Okay, think about it." It turned out that they spent the summer together, and in September, they started to meet again in the city where they studied. "We should celebrate our new year of study," Julia insisted. "I don't mind," Archie said immediately. They got together again at the guy's apartment. Wine, talking, laughing, dancing. Archie went to see Lucy off. As they walked past the park, he put his arm around her. "What are you doing?" She pulled his arm away. "Lucy, stop breaking down." He was very drunk. "Archie, stop it. I trust you as a friend. And you." She walked faster. "What about me?" The guy caught up with her and grabbed her arm. "Nothing." She was trying to get away. "Wait, why did you let me do all that then?" He shouted in her face. "What did I let you do?" She really didn't understand. Taking gifts, going on dates, what? It was all for nothing. He couldn't calm down. "Stop it. Let me go." She ripped my arm out and ran. "No, I'm not letting you go that easily." He pushed her. "Please, you've been so good," she cried. "It's over." He pulled up her skirt. "Bastard," she spat in his face. The guy stopped. The spit seemed to sober him up. He sat down on the pavement. At that moment, Lucy jumped to her feet and ran as fast as she could to the dormitory. "Lucy, what happened?" The janitor shouted to her. She saw that the girl's hair was disheveled and her sweater was torn, but she had already run away without answering her question. Archie didn't show up for a few days, probably because he was ashamed and Lucy didn't want to see him. The girl did not tell anyone anything, just stopped gathering company. "Why weren't you with us yesterday?" Julia asked her. "Just did not want to, tried to look natural girl." "Well, I see. I'm not in the mood. I don't want to pester the neighbor." Archie showed up a week later. He called Lucy. She didn't want to go at first, but it was necessary to find out everything to the end. The girl came down to the watch. Let's go for a walk, her boyfriend called her. No, I'm not going anywhere with you. She remembered the last walk. Why, I love you, he shouted so that everyone paid attention to them. Enough, stop this concert. My husband is coming back any day now. She wanted to leave. You'll be sorry, he began to threaten. What can you do? Grinned the girl and went to her room. John wrote down the date he would be back. By this day, Lucy had arrived at her parents' house to meet her beloved husband with them. John got off the wagon all handsome. He walked up to his mother-in-law and wife. All together they went home to celebrate the meeting. The fathers were not at the train station. They prepared everything at home. When everyone was assembled, the questioning began. And the next day the guy and the girl went to the city. There they again rented an apartment. The guy wanted to enter at least a college, to have at least some education. How glad I am that we are together again, she hugged her lover. Thank you for waiting, he pressed her against him. For a week, everything was very good in the couple. On Monday, Lucy went to study. She had no premonitions. She sat out her classes. After that, she went to the store, bought groceries, and hurried home. Selena, I'm home, she shouted as she entered the apartment. She didn't hear a response. She walked into the room. The guy wasn't there and neither were his things. Lucy stood confused. She didn't understand what had happened. Please pick up the phone. She stood with the phone in her hands. Her husband was unavailable. She threw the phone on the bed. She herself buried herself in her pillow and started to cry. He couldn't go anywhere, only to his mom. The girl got out of bed, began to pack. Not a few hours later, she was in her hometown. Mom, did John come by? She asked from the doorstep. What are you doing here? A woman came out to her. Answer me? Lucy was waiting. No, what happened? Her mother was curious. I'll tell you later. I don't know yet. She went to her mother-in-law's. Aunt Selena, she knocked on the door. What do you want? John opened it. Please, love, explain what's going on. She wanted to hug him, but he pulled her arms away. Lucy, we're breaking up. He was very serious. What? Why? She sat down on the poof in the hallway, covered her face with her hands and cried. Here, this is not enough for you. He did not explain anything to her, threw an envelope in front of the girl. Lucy took the envelope, opened it. There was a letter and many pictures. The paper stated that she had been dating a certain Archie for a year. He gave her flowers, gifts, went out, kissed her. Attached to all this were photographs. One of her sitting on Vladimir's lap, another of him giving her flowers. Lucy threw it all on the floor. She cried even more, realized that the classmates so decided to get back at her. Selena, I'm sorry, but we had nothing. She approached her husband. Don't call me that. It was obvious he had no intention of communicating. I swear to you. Yes, we dated, we went out, but it never went any further than that. She was silent, remembering the night Archie had almost committed a terrible act. Why didn't you write to me about it? He's a friend of ours. I would have said you were in the same company, but you didn't. Why? He didn't look at her. I don't know. I didn't want to upset you. I don't need anyone else but you. She sat down next to him. No, I can't forgive that. The boy put his head down on his hands. But why? She was getting hysterical. It's a betrayal, he said quietly. John, I understood everything. I realized I only need you. She stood up, came up behind him and hugged him. Lucy, don't. He hasn't done anything. He's a scoundrel because I didn't go with him. He did that so you and I would break up. Lucy didn't want to tell him about that situation. I don't care which one of you, which one. He got up and went into the hallway. The pictures were still lying there. I'm not leaving until you forgive me, Lucy said. Well, you can settle down. You've been here 1,000,000 times. You know what's where. The guy started to put on his shoes. And you. The girl cried again. And I need to think it over. He walked out and slammed the door. Not 15 minutes later, the door opened and Selena walked in. She saw the girl, the mess in the hallway, came up to her. What happened here? The mother-in-law asked. John left, slumped down in Lucy's chair. After that, they called Betty. She came over. Lucy told them everything. Yes, I know that she was in touch with this Archie. They even came to visit together, was surprised by the mother that her husband did not believe her daughter. Look what he sent him, showed the girl the pictures, chose the most provocative ones. The women read and looked at everything. So, now I'll call him. Selena got up and started dialing her son's number. What's he saying? Betty looked at her. Lucy, go home. He said he'll think about it. He'll come and talk to you. Selena spoke quietly and stroked her daughter-in-law's back. Do you promise? She raised her eyes to her. Yes, she kissed the top of her head. Lucy packed up and walked to the train station. She sat in the apartment again and suffered. How she wanted to find Archie now and tell him everything. But she knew how mean he was, so she didn't want to make things worse. The next day she was back at school. Every time she came home she hoped John had arrived, but he hadn't. Hi, he came after a month. John, she wanted to throw herself at him but didn't. She thought she would push him away. I came to talk to him. He came into the apartment. And that was it? Lucy felt like she was going to cry again. Let's see. He walked over and sat down on the couch. Ask me, I'll tell you everything. She sat down next to him. Tell me everything as it happened, her husband asked. And Lucy told for about an hour how it all began and how it ended. The only thing she missed was the story in the park. Why didn't you tell him you thought of him as a friend? The young man couldn't understand. How could I realize that he doesn't know it himself, she reflected. Yeah, you still have a lot of learning to do, he smirked. John, I swear to you that, between us, nothing happened. She moved closer to him. I believe you. He reached out and hugged her. Really? She snuggled in. I went out with him. He couldn't really say anything. And at the end, he admitted he was doing it out of spite, just like you said. John leaned over and started kissing his wife. Lucy was glad that she and her husband were doing well. Now every morning she prepared his breakfast, went to study, and in the evening they had Jacoptic meetings. John went to school, at the same time went to work in the police. Lucy rejoiced in her husband's success. Darling, guess what? She was holding a small box. I don't know. He took the gift from her hands. Open it. She stood there without breathing. The young man opened the lid, looked first inside and then at Lucy. Is this what I think it is? He didn't want to get excited ahead of time. Yes, she clapped her hands together. Inside the box was a 2-strike pregnancy test and a pacifier. We love it. He stood up and hugged her. Afterwards, the young people informed the future grandmothers about everything. The latter were, of course, delighted. John continued to work. Lucy had only a few months to finish her studies. After that, she was not going to get a job anywhere because she would start her maternity leave. Wait, her husband pulled away from her. His phone was ringing. Okay, she went into the kitchen. Honey, I'm being paged. He's leaning over her from behind. What? It's your day off, she got upset. Yeah, but some thugs robbed the cash register in one of the villages. They were spotted and now they're inside shooting back. He was fully dressed. Be careful, his wife kissed him. He walked out of the apartment. Lucy herself doesn't know why, but she crossed him. She had never done that before. Lucy, the phone rang in the night. Yes, she didn't understand anything when she woke up. You can come to the hospital. John is hurt, a male voice told her calmly. Not understanding, she sat up in bed. Come, a silence formed on the other end. She didn't realize what she was doing. Rushed to the hospital. What? She expected to be led to John now. Those scumbags were shooting buckshot. He's been hit. He's unconscious now, muttered what was probably a co-worker. Can I see him? Lucy asked. I don't know. He looked around, looking for a doctor. The girl was thrashing around the corridor. She couldn't gather herself. When the doctor came to them, he explained that the wound was serious. The shot could go in different directions. Lucy started calling her and John's parents. By morning, everyone was gathered. Selena was crying. No one was bothering her. For 3 long days, women and men took turns being on duty at the hospital. And on the morning of the 4th day, John died without regaining consciousness. Daughter, her mother called her. No, she screamed into the phone. Hold on, her mother tried to find words of encouragement, but nothing worked. I'm coming. Lucy wanted to get out of her seat and run to them. No, you don't have to. We'll be right there. Betty stopped her. Everyone was saddened by this sad event. They just sat there in silence. Lucy was staring at one point on the wall. She couldn't even move. Daughter, you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Your husband was a hero. Carlos sat down next to her. I know. Her voice was lifeless. The day of the funeral, Lucy went crazy. Nothing could stop her. She screamed like a wounded animal. And when no one was home, she even tried to kill herself. But her mother came back in time. "Daughter, what are you doing? You have to live. You will have a child." She grabbed her and held her for so long until she stopped kicking. "Mom, I can't do without him. He's my life, my love," the girl screamed. "Everything will be fine. Remember that you'll have a little one soon. Then your brains will fall into place." That's how Harry caught them when he got back to the apartment. What? He didn't finish, he realized. The procession was very slow. So many people had gathered, colleagues, acquaintances, friends, relatives. They were really burying him like a hero. And only Lucy and Selena sat on the bench because they could not believe that their boy and husband were no longer in this world. "I will always be with you." Lucy rushed to the grave. Her father managed to grab her in time. He was ready for it. When it was all over, she just fell on all those wreaths and flowers and sobbed in her voice. "What can I do to help her?" Betty looked at her husband. But at that moment, the girl was writhing in pain, and her mother noticed it and came running over. "She's bleeding," the woman noticed. "Hurry up and call an ambulance." The car arrived. The girl looked like a mad woman. The paramedics had to deal with her. When everyone arrived at the hospital, it was clear that nothing good to expect. And so it was. The doctor came out and told the family that the girl's baby was gone. Why did this happen to her, to our girl?" cried Beatty. The father was also somber. "The girl is under sedation now, but in the evening you can pick her up," mumbled the doctor. "Okay." Beatty looked at her friends. "Unequivocally, we are taking her with us," said Harry. When her parents arrived in the evening, Lucy wasn't herself. She seemed to exist, but really everything inside felt like it had been scorched. When she arrived at her parents' house, all she did was lock herself in her room and sit there, tears flowing all by themselves. "Daughter, you have to come to your senses," Selena told her. "I understand that, but everything died inside me." Looked at her with colorless eyes. "Daughter, well, tell me, what do you see as a way out of this situation?" The mother was ready to do anything to help her girl. "I was thinking, maybe I should go somewhere. I will be distracted by my work. I will forget." Lucy turned away to the window. "Of course, if it will make you feel better, then please," she went on all the girls' terms. Already the next day, Lucy began to pack. Her friend had long ago suggested that she go to work on a shift. And now she was finally right for it. "Julia, is your offer still valid?" Lucy called her. "Yes, of course. We're always in need of hands," she said happily. "Then meet me in a couple of days and I'll call you," Lucy decided. She sat at the table with her relatives. It was not as cheerful as it had always been. Selena supported her choice. She continued to socialize with Betty. Lucy slept very badly that night. She was plagued by nightmares. She dreamed of a girl who was reaching out to her and asking her not to leave. In the morning, the girl woke up in a cold sweat. Lucy left. She sat on the train, looking out the window and thought about nothing. At the station, she was met by Julia. The friends hugged. While driving to the place, the girl told everything that happened. She could only sympathize. "Well, here we are." They got out near some building. Now Lucy had to live in the dormitory again. And again her roommate was Julia. "Just like back at school," she smiled. "Yes," Lucy shook her head. In the morning they went to work. The new girl had to learn everything. They had to work in the dining hall, washing dishes, floors, walls, and everything else. Sometimes she'd be asked to serve. It was understandable. "Well, do you agree?" Her neighbor looked at her. "Yes, I have no choice." Lucy was ready for anything. The work was hard at first. When she got involved in the process, there was no time left at all. From the very morning until late in the evening, the girl was in the kitchen. She came home and just fell off her feet. But after she realized everything, she grew to her working time. Now she could have tea with the girls and go out in the evening. "Let's go. There is a place where everyone gathers to spend leisure time," Julia called her when it had been a few weeks. Okay, Lucy wanted to go out. They packed up and set off on their adventure. Lucy knew that with Julia she was sure to find them. Oh, what beauties! They hadn't gotten anywhere yet and they had already been spotted. Two young men stopped to meet the girls. "Hi," Julia said to them. "What do you plan to do?" The young men were curious. "We haven't decided yet. the neighbor said honestly, and it was true. Come on, you can help brighten up our boring evening, they called the girls. Lucy said nothing, watching. They came to the local cafe, which was very small, but there were so many people here that it was strange how everyone got in. So here's to the meeting. The young men were fun. Let's get acquainted. The first thing Lucy said pleased everyone. That's right, the people in the room caught on. I'm Steve, and this is my friend Austin, now spoke the one who before that was also more silent. Lucy sat sad. She didn't want anything. Then Steve called her outside. Do you want to go for a walk? He was already giving her his hand. Okay, they went. The town was small. They came to a house. Would you like to come in? The new acquaintance asked. Why not? Lucy didn't care. They went into the place where Steve had rented a place. It was obvious that he was not alone. Wine? He pulled a bottle out of the cupboard. Come on, the girl agreed to everything. When the bottle was emptied, Lucy sat looking at the young man. Come to me. He held out his arms to her. She stood up and walked over, dizzy. It felt good because all thoughts had gone somewhere. Steve sat her on his lap and started kissing her. The girl liked it. She gave in to his caresses. She was staying with him that night. Wake up. You have to go to work. Steve woke her up in the morning. Her head hurt. It felt like it was going to fall apart. Yes, thank you. Lucy was embarrassed because she found 3 other males in the room. I'll come back tonight, the young man promised, but Lucy never met him again. What, are you waiting for him? Asked Julia. How is it that in such a small town, we have not met for several weeks? Did not understand the girl. They can come for a one-time job, pull a heating main or an electrician, and go to the next object, explained the neighbor. I see. Lucy looked at her hands, which had become rough from the detergents. They continued to get out with her friend. Lucy had already gotten into the work. In the 6 months she had been working here, she had not given up wine and men. Lucy, you weren't like this. What happened to you? Julia asked her. My problems. She didn't want to justify herself to anyone. Her mother called every day. Lucy sent her money and lied that there was a lot of work and she couldn't come home. Betty believed her, so she didn't say anything. And the girl went on with her life. Julia, are you coming today or not? She called her friend. Wait, she had a headache, so she couldn't get out of bed. Okay, I'll go then, slammed the girl's door. It wasn't often that they had time to go out, so she didn't want to waste it. That evening she met Sasha. He was so handsome and also brutal, it seemed to Lucy. They took a long walk, talked, and then went to visit him. He lived alone. That was good. Lucy and Alexander spent the night together. In the morning, Lucy went to her place. She no longer expected to meet the man, but he came the next day. You? The girl was surprised then. Why such a surprise? He did not understand. Simply, she was ashamed to admit it. Are you coming? He waited for an answer. Yes, this insolence and something else like Lucy in this man. Once again, they were at Alexander's house. Everything was going well. He was doing a lot for the girl. Julia, he asked me to live with him, Lucy told her friend in the evening. And you? She tensed up. Why, I'll probably agree. The girl was glad. He is some kind of murky, did not believe Alexander neighbor. You just don't know him. That's the first impression. Lucy was sure of it. It's up to you to decide. Her friend pressed her lips together. She didn't like it. Okay, don't be offended. She hugged and kissed her neighbor, took her suitcase and left the room. From that moment, Alexander and Lucy formed a couple. They went everywhere together. Everything was fine. When the girl began to live together with Alexander, she began to notice that he was doing something illegal in addition to working here. One day, she decided to ask, but she was answered so rudely that she didn't even think about it anymore. Why are your eyes red? Julia noticed at work. Don't mind her. Lucy turned away from her. I see, she's hitting you, her friend guessed. No, she was telling the truth. It's just that she cried all night after a big scolding. Okay, tell me if anything, continued the girl. With Sasha was difficult, but Lucy swallowed everything. After all, stability. She noticed that different people came to him. They talk about something, do something. But the girl didn't dare to ask about it anymore. Lucy, aren't you going home at all? Her mother asked her when she called. Mommy, of course I'm going, but not now, a little later. She couldn't explain anything to the woman. Who called you? Alexander came up to her. Mommy, she showed her phone. I can also write Mom and Angelica will call me, he spoke in a stern voice. Are you jealous? She laughed. It was the first time he had ever hit her. Lucy stood, holding her cheek, and looked at Alexander. No one had ever touched her in her life until that moment. If you misbehave, you'll get another, he promised her. Why? She didn't deserve to be treated like that. You asked me how many men you've had in all the time you've lived here, and now all they say is that I picked up the poor guy. If I'd known before, I never would have done such a thing. He clenched his fists. That was before you, she thought. She was acting roughly now. That was it. The conversation was over. The man just walked out of the apartment. Lucy wanted to leave, but she was afraid. There was no one to complain to either. When she got to work the next day, she decided to share with her friend. Can you imagine the look on her face when she told her everything? Report it, Julia advised her. I'm scared, Lucy admitted honestly. Do you want me to report it? She suggested. Try, but if he finds out, we'll be in trouble, her friend told her. Don't worry, we've been in more trouble than this, she promised her. Lucy returned home. She was really afraid of her roommate, but she had nothing to do but wait. A week passed. Alexander came home. Did you snitch? He came up to Lucy and grabbed her by the chest. What are you talking about? She made big eyes. You know what? He gathered some things, then put a chair in the middle of the room and sat the girl down. What are you doing? She was shaking, scared. You'll find out now, he grinned. Alexander tied her to the chair. He doused everything with a smelly liquid for fear. Lucy did not even immediately realize that it was gasoline. He took one more look at her. He flicked a match, threw it on, and closed the doors. Help! She began to scream with all her might. At that moment came the realization that she was not living right, but no one heard the girl. The house was old and wooden. The logs were quickly seized by the fire. Someone called the fire department. Lucy was panting. She rocked harder on the chair. She fell down. It was easier here, but she realized she was losing consciousness. When she was at her wit's end, she felt someone lift her off the floor. Lucy, she opened her eyes. Julia was sitting next to her. Where is he? The girl's first question was. Don't worry, he's right where he needs to be, her friend reassured her. Well and good, Lucy closed her eyes. Imagine, you were right. He was doing all sorts of nonsense to destroy everything. Everything and set it on fire so they wouldn't find it. Julia started whispering. Yeah, and me for one, the girl cried. All's well that ends well. The neighbor squeezed her hand. What did the doctor say? Lucy wanted to know. Nothing happened to you, just smoke inhalation, the neighbor reassured her. I want to go home so badly, the girl was still crying. Everything will be all right, Julia nodded her head. Lucy was discharged. She immediately wrote a statement and went home. Now on the train the girl sat. She understood everything and realized that she had been bad. How could she have let John down like that? What had happened to her? Mom, she walked into the apartment. The prodigal daughter had finally returned. Her father came out to meet her. Where's Mom? She came up and hugged Dad. She will come now, in the store, he replied. It was nice and cozy at home. Lucy went to her room. Everything was so nice here. Lucy? Mommy asked from the hallway. Mom ran to her girl. Hello, dear, hugged her. They went into the kitchen. The woman put the kettle on and then began to assemble the table. What a fool I was, Lucy said, looking at her mother. Don't talk bad. You were stressed. You felt bad. The woman reassured her. Yes, everything can be, her daughter agreed with her. Lucy decided to exhale a little and then start her life over again. She looked for job vacancies. Not 2 weeks later, she was invited to work. Where was it this time? She was just about to go home. She walked down the street and realized that there was never any extra money. Hello, Lucy entered the chief's office. Greetings, have you made your decision? He asked her. Yes, I have, she smiled at him. Then write your application and you can start work. He handed her a blank sheet of paper. Lucy realized that it would be very hard, but the money would come. She wrote everything and left the office. In the evening, she was at home, sitting and thinking about what would happen next in her life. Lucy, you will pull all the veins out of yourself, Elizabeth told her. They met in the hospital. Now they began to communicate closely. "What can I do? No one can help me," she said. "Do you even have a rest?" her friend asked her. "When?" Lucy smiled at her. "I see, let's go out." Elizabeth suggested it. It was rare, but the girl thought that after the day shift, in the evening you can relax. And indeed, with Elizabeth, they could go to a cafe or restaurant, spend a pleasant time there, relax. "Oh, it's so good that you're taking me out." Lucy leaned back in her chair. What else do girlfriends do? She didn't understand. In this place they liked most of all pleasant music, good cuisine, friendly staff. "Girl, can I ask you to dance?" A man approached Lucy. Of course, she looked at her friend and gave her hand. Anthony, he introduced himself as they walked to the center. Lucy, it had been a long time since she had danced with anyone or socialized with the opposite sex. "You're a good dancer," he said. "You too." She didn't know what to say. "It was nice, thank you," he said at the end as he walked her back to her seat. "Well, what's going on there? Did you get to know each other?" Elizabeth started asking at once. "Yes." Lucy's face blushed a little. "And what then?" She waited. "Nothing. Thank you for the dance. You heard yourself." The girl raised her glass. But she was wrong. When they were about to go home, Anthony came up to them. "Can I walk such beautiful ladies home?" He walked in the middle. "Of course," smiled Elizabeth. She lived with the man, now taking care of her friend. They walked. There was a casual conversation. Elizabeth saw her boyfriend ahead, said goodbye and ran to him. "Where do you live?" Anthony asked. "Why are you calling me? I look so old," she asked him. "Sorry." He was embarrassed. They walked on. "There's my house." They walked up to the driveway. "Can we exchange phone numbers?" He tried. Yes, Lucy agreed. Anthony was a nice man. She walked home, feeling as if flowers were blooming on her soul. Anthony called the next day. Although Lucy was very busy, she took a moment to talk to him. He offered to meet, but she couldn't today. It was the night shift. "All I can suggest is that tonight you come here. I'll be out," she muttered. "Okay, that would be fine with me for starters." She could hear how pleased he was. Lucy didn't know if he would come or not, but she hoped he would. And he came, and not just for no reason, but with flowers. "God, it's been 1,000 years since anyone gave me flowers." She took the bouquet and smelled it. "It makes me feel good to do this," he smiled. From that day on, Anthony and Lucy started dating. When it was a day off, they would go to the park or just sit in the yard. The rest of the days, as it worked out. "Why do you live in a rented apartment? Move in with me," he suggested to her after 6 months of meetings. Would that be convenient? She was afraid. She'd already trusted him once. "What are you saying?" "Of course it would be convenient," he laughed. "I'll have to think about it," Lucy smiled. Of course, he understood that. "Okay, I agree." Lucy thought to herself that she'd have found a real man. They started living together. Anthony was flying on wings. "Why don't you have a rug in your house?" Lucy asked him one day. "I don't know. I hadn't thought about it." He looked at the floor, which was covered with linoleum. "We should get some," she concluded. "Suit yourself," he said, but he didn't offer to give money. Okay, Lucy isn't proud. She has enough. She'll do it all herself. In 6 months, she bought 2 carpets, bedding, a kitchen set, which was assembled by specially hired people. "Could you do it yourself?" The woman was surprised when she came home from work. "You see, the hands do not grow from there." He waved his hands. After that, it was his turn to buy a bed, and then a large closet for clothes. "Why are you doing this?" Elizabeth asked her when Lucy was telling her. "Why, I live there too. I want it to be comfortable." Lucy did not understand the question. "Oh, you live like this with men. You invest in them, and then they leave you." Elizabeth sighed. At that moment, Lucy remembered Alexander, shrugged. "No, Anthony is not like that." "Elizabeth, can you lend me a couple thousand? I saw such a nice shirt. I wanted to buy Anthony," she asked her friend. "What, you also dress him?" She was amazed. "What's the big deal?" Lucy was amazed again. "Did he buy you anything besides that broom on the first date?" "No," Lucy thought. "Well, you're ready to try. All in your Anthony. He only did what he did to bring you to his place." She marveled at the woman's naivety. "Come on, he does so much for me," Lucy said. "Oh, you'll be on his side no matter what you say." She wouldn't lend money to her friend. "Fine, I'll borrow it somewhere else," she said. She liked to come home, cook for her lover, and then lie in a warm bed. "We're having guests over today," Anthony said. "Good, it's the day shift." She came over and kissed him. "Are you gonna get everything ready?" He looked expectant. "When I'll be at work all day, let's order in." She hoped Anthony would agree. "Okay, just do it yourself. I don't have time." He went out. "Elizabeth, would you like to join us today?" she asked when she got to the service. "What's the occasion?" She was curious. "Nothing. Just Anthony invited some friends and I thought I'd invite you." She was scrubbing the floors and talking at the same time. "Well, we'll be there tonight. My friend didn't mind." Lucy, as promised Anthony, ordered everything. She paid for the order. All that was left was to receive it at home. In the evening, she saw that many strangers had come. They were her husband's co-workers. As long as everyone was sitting at the table, talking and eating, everything was fine. But at some point, Lucy realized that the guests had had too much to drink. "We should dance," Anthony said. "Okay." One of the girls got up and turned up the volume. "Won't the neighbors fight?" Elizabeth asked Lucy. "No, they are normal." The woman was sure of it. She went to the kitchen to get more snacks. Look, when she came back, her friend pointed with her eyes to a couple dancing. It was Anthony and that girl dancing. "Fine, let them relax." Lucy waved them off. "Yeah, if someone danced with Barry like that, I'd kill them." Elizabeth followed her friend. They sat down at the table, but Lucy couldn't help but stare at what her man was doing. They were wriggling so much, he touched the girl on every bulging spot she had. "That's enough." She got up from the table and turned the sound down. "What's the matter?" The ones who were just bouncing on the carpet stopped. "What are you doing here?" She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she couldn't help it. Okay, what are you yelling about?" Anthony said, and they giggled with the girl. "And you still believe him?" asked Elizabeth as she put her coat on in the hallway. "Stop it," Lucy interrupted her. "Okay, your life, but I suggest you take a closer look," her friend warned her. Lucy returned to the room and the couple stood again, already without music, moving slowly. She saw Anthony hugging her as if he wanted to take her immediately. She got disgusted, turned away and left. She cried in the kitchen. All the guests had left, only this girl was left. Elizabeth was in pain. She started washing dishes to distract herself. She heard the front door slam, thought it was the girl leaving. "Anthony?" She went into the room, but there was no one there. She'd done so much for this union and he'd do this to her. She cleaned up, made the bed, and went to bed. He came in the morning, smelling someone else's perfume in the bed. "Did you like it?" Lucy turned to him. "What?" He wasn't quite sober yet. "The broad," Lucy explained. "Are you jealous?" He chuckled. "No," the girl lied. "Well, sleep then." He turned on his side and sniffled. How to live after that? She just didn't sleep until morning. "Hi," she said hello to everyone when she got to work. "Why do you look so bad?" Elizabeth whispered to her. Not sleeping well, Lucy didn't feel like sharing her thoughts with anyone. "I see, I've made a mess of things," her friend guessed. "What should I do?" The girl almost burst into tears in response. "In the first place, leave one position. All the money you cannot earn, and you are not like a man," advised Elizabeth. "I've already thought about it," she nodded. Today, she went and wrote a statement. If Anthony was making a decent income, she would quit. She was so fed up. As the years went by, Lucy continued to live with the same Anthony. They were satisfied with their mutual neighborliness. There was no love lost between them. He went out without even hiding it. "What's wrong with me?" she asked him one day. "What kind of questions?" The man looked at her surprised. "Just leave it." She didn't want to continue the conversation. If he didn't understand, she didn't have to. "Lucy, you need another man," Elizabeth said. "You look at me. Who will look at me?" self-critically answered her friend. "You want to talk about yourself. You are still beautiful. Just a long time ago did not take care of themselves." The girl encouraged her as she could. "I did everything for him, and he is so," cried Lucy. "Everything. Do not regret anything. You still have everything ahead of you." Elizabeth hugged her. They continued to work. Lucy wondered why she had given up the night shifts. She didn't want to go home, but there was nothing to do, and she again went to an empty apartment where everything was well done. She was cooking dinner, and the man did not want to return there. "Where have you been?" She felt his cold body at night under the blanket. "That's it. Go back to sleep. He didn't turn to her. Tears choked. That night she decided everything. She went to work in the morning, spent half a day there, took a day off. She came home, packed her things. She couldn't stop the tears. At first I wanted to write a note, but in the end I decided not to. She stopped, circled the nest she herself had made with a glance, turned around and left. Hello, she came to Elizabeth. They had agreed that her friend would stay here for a couple of days. Come in quickly. She didn't want to keep her guest on the doorstep for long. They sat for a while, cooked dinner, ate, and went to bed. Lucy did not want to disturb the couple, so she stayed out of the room until nightfall. Lucy, go to the 8th room. A man needs help there, the head nurse asked her. She put a basin of clean towels on the table. She entered the room. He was lying on the bed. She did not understand whether the man was asleep or unconscious. Quietly, she approached the bed, checked the IV. Everything was normal there. Then she began to remove absorbent cotton, syringes, and other things from the bedside table. Drink, she heard, and she was scared. Now she took a mug that was standing there, dipped a cotton swab and moistened his lips. He licked greedily. More, he asked. Yep, she repeated her movements. He wrinkled his nose and opened his eyes. The whites were red. The young man looked at Lucy. She blushed for some reason. He reminded her of John. She came over and sat on the edge of the bed, though it was not customary. If you could say so. He could hardly even speak, but he tried to smile. Soon you'll get better and you'll be as good as new, Lucy reassured the young man. Your words would be. He began to cough. The girl quickly approached. You don't have to talk much. She lifted his head to make him stop. Elizabeth, have you seen the patient from the 8th? She asked her friend in the corridor. No, why? She turned and looked at her in surprise. I don't know, but when I saw him, something inside clicked, Lucy admitted. That's a good sign, Elizabeth laughed. She decided to find out a little about who was in their facility. She asked this one, that one, the other one, the third one, and gathered a lot of information and gossip. Already in the evening, when they came home, Elizabeth called Lucy into the kitchen. They needed to talk. What are you suddenly in the middle of the week? The girl looked at the bottle of wine that stood on the table. We need to talk about something, Elizabeth said cryptically. Okay, Lucy took the glasses and poured ruby liquid into them. Listen, your new acquaintance is not simple. The hostess cut the cheese. I don't even know his name. Only later I realized that I could look it up in the medical records. She blushed again. I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of people say about him that he doesn't do the right things. Elizabeth lowered her voice. What kind of things? Lucy asked in a whisper, leaning over the table. Both laughed afterward. No one was home and they were vociferating. I do not know, said her friend seriously, but he is not in our hospital because he fell down the stairs. Why are you telling me all this? I'm not going to do anything. Lucy took a sip of wine. Yeah, I can see you sitting there, blushing and turning white. The girl smiled. Well, enough. Time will tell, you know. He reminded me something of my first husband. Immediately became sad eyes. Then I see, Elizabeth guessed why everything is so. They sat until the husband of the friend came. Then they fed Sergei dinner, talked, and went to their rooms. In the morning, Lucy got up. Her mood was very good. For the first time in a long time, she sat in front of the mirror, made her hairstyle, made up her eyes. When she stepped out into the hallway, Elizabeth gasped. Lucy, you're so? She stopped talking. Like what? She smiled. I don't know, gentle, beautiful. They left the house and headed to their work. Lucy didn't wait to be asked or forced to go to room number 8. She went there herself. The first thing she did today was look at the medical history. She took it and looked at it like she was looking at what the patient had been prescribed. She read that his name was Jacob. She glanced out the window and said the name to herself again. What are you hanging out there? He's been looking at her for a few minutes now. I see you're feeling better, she said sarcastically. Give me a drink, he said sharply, and because his voice was hoarse, it seemed to be rude. Now, a little offended Lucy, she went to the nightstand and gave him a glass of water. Thanks, Sardi. He handed her back the empty glass. It's okay, she headed for the exit. Sit with me, the young man said in a different tone. What? She stopped at the door. Lucy heard everything, but she wished he would ask again. Stay with me. He didn't refuse her. Okay, she smiled, but when she turned to him, she was completely serious. Lucy walked over to the bed, pulled up a chair and sat down on it. Tell me about yourself. He lay on his back and looked up at the ceiling. My name is Lucy. I work here. She shrugged because she didn't know what to say next. Husband, kids? He turned his head slightly in her direction. Just like that, her cheeks began to blush again. Why, are there any secrets? He grinned and then grimaced. No, Lucy was confused. I'm just kidding. My name is Jacob, and I'm not really into anything, so I came to you for a while, he said. Nice to meet you. The girl was embarrassed. It was obvious that he was getting better because he was already joking and talking a lot. That's what the girl told the doctor when she left the room. She could not wait to meet Elizabeth and tell her everything that had happened, but they didn't meet until the evening when they went home. Look, I promised I'd stay with you for a couple days, but it just so happens that I wasn't even looking for anything. Lucy looked at her friend. You what? Do not even think about it. Live as long as you want. You do not embarrass us, sincerely said Elizabeth. And we made friends today, bragged Lucy to her. With whom? She didn't understand because she was quick to change the subject. Jacob, Lucy laughed. Jacob who? She still couldn't understand. What Jacob could Jacob be like? The sick one from 8th grade? Lucy laughed, offended because that was all she could think about. Oh, that's what you mean. Elizabeth laughed at the fact that she hadn't realized it for so long. Yes, he told me about himself. I did the same and all. We are already friends. She recalled how it was. Actually, you can't flirt with patience. Elizabeth wagged her finger. I know, and I don't flirt. The girls were in high spirits. At home, it was business as usual. Lucy couldn't wait to go to bed. She wanted it to be morning already, and she wanted to be by his side. She was going to work alone today. She told Elizabeth that she would get out early to go to the store. No one had come to see the young man in 2 days, so she decided to make him happy with something. Lucy bought some fruit and juice and headed for the hospital. Here I am, she slipped into the room. Hey, he was already half sitting up on the pillows. Look what I brought you. She started to put everything she bought on the nightstand. And why? He looked at it all. To make you happy. She didn't understand his mood today. Okay, he smiled at her, just like last time. After that, they ate oranges, talked and laughed. It's all you was the only thing he kept saying. After that, Lucy started giving Jacob massages. Several times each day she went up to him for it. He would yell, but she ignored it. They were getting up, taking their first steps. In 6 months, Jacob was standing on his own feet. He looked at the girl with great love and gratitude. Would you be my wife? He asked her at breakfast. Do you honestly want that? She couldn't believe she was sitting here with him, as if all those years she'd spent in a bad relationship hadn't happened. What are you talking about? Of course you do. You are the kindest and most loyal girl. He got up from his seat and, leaning on his cane, walked over to her. Yes, I want to be your wife, she blushed. Then you will soon have the best wedding ever. He went to the seat. They were no longer in their 20s, but much more, but they were both young at heart. At the wedding were invited parents. Did not forget Lucy and Selena and her husband, who were happy for her. In addition, the former mother-in-law confirmed that Jacob is very similar to John. The friends had a nice celebration. The bride and groom were happy. How are you doing with him? Is he good? Elizabeth asked her. Very good. You have no idea how caring he is, Lucy said and looked at her husband. Didn't it seem to you that he only needed you when it was bad? Her friend began to doubt again. Look, we've been through so much together. I don't think he proposed for nothing. Lucy didn't believe it. I wish it were so. Elizabeth even spat. The guests left and the young people were alone. Jacob wasn't quite well enough to do business again, so he spent a lot of time at home. So far, so good. But as he got stronger, he started to disappear from home. At first, he tried to come home every day, but it was not very convenient for him. So after a while, Lucy slept alone. The girl had nothing to do. She called her friend Elizabeth. Oh, that again, you have nothing to do. She was upset for Lucy. No, everything is fine. Now he will catch up with what he missed while he was sick, and everything will fall back into place, defended her husband's wife. We'll see. Elizabeth didn't believe anything anymore. And indeed, Jacob, not 3 months later, was right at home. Lucy wondered very much what was wrong. Why are you always at home? What about your work? She wanted to know everything about the man she loved. Don't ask unnecessary questions. If I'm at home, it's necessary, he told her rudely. Lucy did not interfere. She remembered what had happened when she had interfered in the affairs of her roommate. She was pleased that they were always together, of course. Jacob didn't spend every minute with her the way his wife would have liked. Why can't I go to work? She asked her husband, bored at home. No, you won't, he said imperiously. Can I at least go to a friend to visit? She could not sit in four walls. No, I need you. He took her hand and sat her on his lap. That made Lucy melt. She didn't need anything else. After a short time at home, Jacob started leaving again. He could be gone for a week or more. Lucy was jealous, worried. Come and visit and we'll talk, Elizabeth urged her. And if her husband came back, she didn't want to upset him. Oh, so sit with your husband, she said, as if offended. Jacob never showed up. A day later, Lucy got a call from the hospital, her heart sinking. She pulled herself together in a minute and drove to her lover's house. He was bleeding internally. What had happened? No one would explain. Beloved, come to your senses. She sat beside his bed after the operation, but all she got in response was silence. Again, a couple weeks in hospital and then bed rest at home. Lucy was there for him. Porridge, broth, medication. She could stay up nights because Jacob wasn't feeling well. Okay, I've got errands to run. It's been a month since he got out of that hospital bed. Lucy disappeared into Jacob's room for most of her working hours. After a week, the doctor gave him permission to get up, but he couldn't do it himself, so Lucy helped him. She walked with him first around the room, then in the hallway as well. Jacob said nice things, thanked her. A month passed very quickly, and during that time the young people became friends and they said goodbye very warmly. Will we meet again? The girl didn't want to let him go. Of course, he promised and got into the car that came after him. Lucy was sad. She looked after the departing car and almost cried. How are you? Elizabeth came up behind her. Everything is fine, blinked the girl, and a tear fell treacherously on her cheek. Come on, her friend took her hand and led her back into the building. Lucy continued to stay with Elizabeth. After she told her to live as long as she wanted, she hadn't even thought about it. Now she realized she had to look for an apartment. What are you doing? You've been living for so long. You don't need to move out, began to persuade her Elizabeth when her friend told her about it. I don't know, I still feel uncomfortable. Lucy was telling the truth. It's fine, trust me. I would have told you right away, the girl assured her. Lucy waited for him, but he didn't come. It was a shame. A month passed, the second, and Roma was still not there. Enough waiting, her girlfriend pitied her. You know, I try to talk myself out of it, but I can't, Lucy told her then. Another month later, a car pulled up to the hospital. I need Lucy, a young guy ran in. Now, Elizabeth met him, went to look for her friend. Hello. The girl came out into the lobby. She was very surprised that someone was looking for her. I need you. He showed her the car. The girl's heart beat faster. She had really waited for him. She turned to her friend, who looked surprised at everything that was happening. Let's go, Lucy said confidently. They climbed into the parlor. The guy there said Jacob wasn't feeling well and he'd sent him here for her. Excitement set in. Let's go, the girl said confidently. They drove off. Elizabeth stood at the window and saw everything. She was worried about her friend because she did not say anything, where she went, where to look for her in case of emergency. What happened to him? Lucy worried in the car. You'll see, it was obvious that the guy was focused on the road. They arrived somewhere outside of town, there to a house that was surrounded by a fence. The girl got out of the car, waiting for the doors to open so she could get in. She was led into the house, escorted into a room. Jacob was in bed again. He was asleep. Hello, she said loudly to make him wake up. Lucy, he opened his eyes and mumbled her name. What happened to you? Why didn't you come? She walked over to his bed. He moaned. Now she looked at the medication that was lying here. She decided to give him a painkiller. Don't, asked the doctor. He shook his head. Where is he? She rushed to the door, stepping out into the hallway. There she was shown to a room with a man in it. Are you the doctor? She turned to him. Yes, is something wrong? He got up from his chair. He's in pain, she pointed to the wall. Now he came out of his and went into the room where Jacob was lying. He saw that one of the medicines had been set aside. I wanted to give it to him, but he wouldn't let me. He sent it to you, Lucy admitted. Do you have a medical degree? The doctor turned to her. Yes, I'm a nurse, she nodded. Good, you wanted to do the right thing. You have to trust. The last words were addressed to Jacob. Thank you, Lucy said quietly. She stayed to live in the house. She called Elizabeth, told her to write a statement for her. After that, she alerted the management, and they went along with it. She sat by the bedside of a man she really liked. Lucy didn't know why she was willing to do anything for him. She gave him compresses, turned him over, gave him shots, IVs. Whatever she had to do. Thank you. He took her hand and pulled her to him. Anyone would have done the same. She tried to say something. Because her heart was pounding, she was worried about being so close to him. No, he looked into her eyes and then pulled her close and kissed her. Lucy realized she loved this man. Let's try to get up. He'd been sitting up for a while now, but the bones were shattered. They'd been put back together piece by piece, so it wasn't a given that he'd be able to do anything. Probably couldn't, he doubted. But Lucy took his hands, one placed on her shoulders. The young man managed it. He stood by the bed for only a few seconds, then sat back down. There, she was breathing hard because it was a little hard. Be careful, his wife saw him off. She, as in other years, was alone in the house. There was a different kind of joy now. The husband had hired a housekeeper, whom Lucy liked to talk to. Naomi, still have time to do everything. Let's have lunch. She invited her assistant to the table. I can't do that, she made big eyes. What's the big deal? Lucy didn't understand. They sat down at the table, talked about a lot of things, mostly about life. Naomi told about her difficult fate. So Lucy opened up to this woman. Of course, it hadn't happened the first day they met. It had been a couple years since she'd been employed there. Jacob came home very rarely, and he and his wife practically stopped communicating. Lucy would rush to meet her lover when he showed up, but he'd say he was tired and wanted to go to bed. And in the morning, he'd disappear again. Jacob, I need to talk to you. Lucy told him seriously when their marriage was 8 years old. Can you do that? He even stopped. Don't you believe it? The woman was so fed up with everything. She was kind of married and kind of not. She wanted clarity. Tell me, he exhaled impatiently. What's going on with you and me? She asked him forehead to forehead. Nothing, he smirked. That smirk of his had attracted Lucy so much before, but now it pissed her off. Jacob, I'm your wife. I've been sitting here alone for years, and you won't let me go anywhere, she cried. And you remember who you were, where I got you out of, and all you can do is look after me. I've got another family, a kid. Yes, I'm married to you, but I'm fine there. You're just a backup. He said all this to her face and left the house. What? She stood there confused. Lucy went to her room, cried a lot. Naomi came over in the evening. She wanted to talk to someone, but the woman couldn't leave the room. Her heart was breaking into pieces. Strangely enough, Jacob came the next day. He went straight to Lucy's room. He sat down on a chair. What? She didn't understand. She'd had a sleepless night, so her head wasn't thinking straight. Who were you before? How did you try to organize your life? He waited. I don't understand, she thought to herself. How could he know all this? Don't talk to the servants. He guessed what she was thinking. Understandable. She looked down at the floor. It was embarrassing if Naomi also exaggerated everything. So, did you make free love? He leaned toward her. Jacob, she didn't want to talk about it. It was a long time ago and not true. Lucy wanted to forget it all like a bad dream. Jacob, what? He jumped to his feet. It was all long before she met you. She tried to speak calmly so as not to irritate the man. Yes, and being told that my wife is an easy woman, it feels good. He grabbed her arm. It hurts me. She started to get scared. Me too. He looked at her and breathed heavily. And what are you going to do now? She couldn't think of anything, only of that grip that clenched tighter and tighter. You don't need to know that. He shoved her so hard that she fell on the bed. Lucy cried, and he gave her a look as if he'd spat at her and walked out. In the evening, Lucy thought of nothing better than to get even. She was alone, pulled a bottle of hard liquor and pills from the bar. Everything was in front of her. Why would she want this life? Everything is wrong and everything is wrong. She's only ruining things for others, her parents, her friends, her men. She poured into a glass, poured in a handful of pills. When she drank the bitter medicine, she felt immediately dizzy. Lucy knew the effects would come quickly. As she was passing out, she saw the front door open. She remembered nothing else. Lucy, she heard, her consciousness was badly clouded. For the first few seconds, she didn't realize where she was or what had happened to her. But it all came. She squeezed her eyes shut, though she hadn't opened them yet. Why couldn't she even die properly? Thank God she woke up. Elizabeth was standing over her. Jacob was beside her. What's wrong with me? Lucy realized that she hadn't gone to the other world, but it couldn't be without a trace. It's okay. Her friend stroked her head. Nothing is good. Neither are the brains in your head. What? Afraid to take more so I can come and feel sorry. He spoke in a tone that made Elizabeth want to punch him in the face. I'm sorry I didn't. Lucy closed her eyes. The man left. The friends were left alone. Tell me the truth, Lucy cried. You have pinched some nerves in your face and also in your neck, but also in general. Your body is poisoned, said her friend. Lucy couldn't think about how she looked now. She was on her way to recovery. That's when she realized what she had done. When she wanted to get a glass of water, she couldn't do it. Her fingers wouldn't listen. She'd get out of bed, but after a while, she'd get tired. On top of that, my immune system was completely weakened. Let's go. Jacob entered the room when she was discharged home. She needs help, Elizabeth said. So help her, he said in a tone that demanded no objection. They left the hospital together, Elizabeth carrying her friend in a wheelchair. Afterward, Jacob put her in the car, and they drove off. At the house, Lucy saw young people, a guy and a girl. She wondered who it could be. They rent an apartment here, he explained. What about me? She wondered. It's okay. They'll be patient, and when they get ready to buy, we'll decide. It was agreed that the young people would try to live in the private sector, and if they liked it, they would buy the house. No one warned them that the landlady would be ill, but the owner assured them that she would not interfere with them. So they did. It was so cold in the room, but Lucy was too shy to ask anyone for anything. She pulled several blankets over herself. She went out to the kitchen, ate something. The young neighbors looked at her, tried to talk, but the woman didn't meet it. Lucy, can I help you? A girl came up to her when she was going to the kitchen again. You have your own life. I don't want to disturb you, she said. Would you like to go for a walk? You're always in the house? Maria asked her. If it's not too much trouble, help me get dressed. Lucy was ashamed, but she hadn't breathed fresh air in months. Of course, Maria did as she was asked. Lucy went out of the house, told the girl that she could handle it from there, and she promised to follow her in a few minutes. It was freezing, and it was cold to be outside for long. Lucy didn't want to be followed, so she presumptuously went into the back of the lot. There she sat for a while, and when she felt herself freezing, she got up and walked back. But the woman did not calculate her strength. She slipped and fell. It is not known how much time passed while Maria was looking for her. What are you doing? You'll catch cold. Maria found her at last. Thank you, cried Lucy. She lay in her room, tears running down her cheeks. Already during the night, Lucy had a fever. It was hard for her to breathe, but the woman didn't call anyone. She was ashamed that she had to ask strangers for help. Lucy, how are you feeling? Maria came into the room. I'm fine, she wheezed. What are you talking about? You have a fever. She went over and touched her head. An ambulance was called and the woman was rushed to the hospital. Bilateral pulmonary edema. They put her in the ward, and then there were several weeks of treatment. Lucy had a long time to recover from this condition. Maria and Elizabeth came to visit her. Thank you, the woman cried. Her friend offered to call her mother, but Lucy was against it. It was not easy for her. What are you saying? Anyone would do that. She recognized herself in Maria. When she felt better, she was allowed to go home. Jacob, hello, Maria called him. We agreed to buy the house from you. He arrived and saw his wife lying in bed. She had lost a lot of weight and her face was distorted. I'll leave her here and file for divorce. Don't worry, she won't live longer than a year. But for that, I'll give you a discount. He looked at the future owners of the house. How can you do that to a person? Maria didn't understand. You do not know how she acted. He scheduled a meeting for tomorrow to draw up the documents and hand over the money. How are you? A girl came into the room in the evening. Why did you agree to leave me here? Lucy asked, while she thought, if it weren't for this, where would she go? She didn't want to be a burden on her mother's shoulders. I talked to my father. He said he would help you in your treatment. Maria sat down next to the bed. She smelled of kindness. What are you saying? I don't need anyone's help. Lucy made a face that made Maria laugh. You do not need to know that. You are still very young. Everything will get better. And people like your husband, you just need to throw aside. Maria saw without any stories what kind of man he is. Lucy was grateful to the girl. She lay back and smiled to herself. Living so many years with a man under the same roof, he offered her money to buy things in the stores. Why did she always refuse? She should have taken it and saved. Now at least she would have a financial cushion. It's nothing. Maria looked after a woman her husband, Mickey Lucy, didn't see often. But when she needed his help, he was there for her. You become like a mother to me. The girl hugged her sometimes. You grew up without her? The woman guessed. Yes, she left us when I was not even 3 years old. It seemed that Maria was going to cry. Gone somewhere or not at all? Lucy asked cautiously. Not at all. A tear rolled down her cheek. I'm sorry. The woman squeezed her hand. It's okay. I don't remember her at all. The girl wiped her tears and smiled again. Lucy decided that she would try, recover, and help Maria in any way she could. But time passed and it did not get better. The cough that used to choke her was much less now. And we have guests. Maria came to a woman's room. Who? The woman tensed up. More than anything else in the world, she was afraid of the arrival of her mother, that when she saw, she would not listen to anyone, just take her home. And Lucy could not afford that. Allow me to introduce Nani. A man entered the room. He had gray hair, but he didn't look old. Jacket, pants, boots, and most of all, Lucy noticed the perfume. She knew it wasn't cheap. Hello, she said quietly, trying to cover her face. You know, Lucy, as much as I've heard about you, it seems like I know you personally. He walked over and shook her hand. Why this officiousness? Just Lucy. She felt the redness coming to her face. Okay then, I'm Nanny. He looked at her. Rays of wrinkles diverged from his eyes, but that only adorned the man. They talked some more and then Maria invited them to the table. Lucy didn't want to go, but Nanny insisted. He helped her up. The woman threw on a robe. I'm sorry I'm like this. Lucy imagined herself, her hair tousled with grain, herself in some kind of robe. What are you talking about? You're sick. We'll sit at the table, and then we'll get you back to bed. He walked very quietly and supported her. Maria did her best. There was nothing on the table. Everyone sat down at the table and talked a lot, including the treatment. I can't agree to this. She looked at Nanny. At that moment, she felt that he was not looking at her as a weak and sick woman. Okay, I'll lend you the money after I can. You pay it back in installments. He tilted his head to the side, waiting for her answer. Are you sure it will help me? Her head was involuntarily tilted this way. I'm 200% sure. He raised his wine glass at something else and drank. I guess I'll be going. Lucy started to get up. No, we're going for a little walk now. Nanny stood up and gave the lady a hand. But me, she pointed to her robe again. That's okay. Here's the coat. He pulled out of the closet. We won't be long. They went outside, stood there for a while, both of them being silent. It was a pleasure to chat. He walked her to her room. We didn't even talk. She smiled her crooked smile. You know, sometimes even being quiet with someone is good. He took her hand, kissed it, and left. Lucy sat on the bed, looking at the closed door. That's why, when she had become so helpless and ugly, she had met a decent man. Not wanting to think about it, she picked up a book and started reading to ward off the bad thoughts. Maria saw Lucy off to the clinic, which her father had paid for. Elizabeth volunteered to accompany her, to be there for her if needed. You don't realize what an amazing man he is, Lucy told her on the road. You know, the fact that he gave money for treatment, yes, but you have to look at him. Again criticized another man, Lucy. You can always tell at first sight, squinted her friend. Yes, but this one doesn't seem to have any flaws. Elizabeth couldn't believe herself when she said that. They arrived at the clinic. There the women were placed in a room. Elizabeth had an extra place. The treatment began. Lucy underwent 3 surgeries in total. The doctors tried to relax her muscles. Whether it worked or not, it will be seen when the rehabilitation course is over. Elizabeth, help, Lucy asked. It was not easy for her. Her face was in bandages. She couldn't even drink properly. Now call right away. That's what I came here for. She jumped up from her seat. You know, I thought I'd call my mother, Lucy said one night. Don't you think it would be a shock to her? She's not a girl anymore. Elizabeth was worried about Betty. I don't know, but for some reason I feel like doing it now. Lucy wanted to cry, but the doctor said she should do it less often. Well, let's wait a couple more days, or in general, discharged and go straight to her, offered options Elizabeth. Soon, you'll find out. Just wait a bit. He drove on. The car stopped outside the restaurant. The man got out, opened the door on Lucy's side, helped her out. Mickey and Maria were waiting for them on the porch. Daddy, the girl wanted to say something, but the man put his finger to his lips. Why are you all like this? Lucy looked at Mickey, who seemed as confused as she was. They walked to the lounge and sat down at a table. Lucy, when Maria started telling me about you, you reminded me of a woman. I couldn't believe it until I saw you. He put a photograph on the table. Lucy took it. There was a young woman who looked just like her. She was wearing the same blue dress at the time it was taken, and her hair was the same. I mean, you turned me into her. It was a little uncomfortable. No, it was just love at first word. Not even a look. Tears appeared in Nanny's eyes again. I like you too. The woman told the truth. Then let's drink to that. They'd all raised their glasses, except Maria. What are you doing? Her father looked at her. I can't. She looked at her husband. What? I'm going to be a grandfather? Nanny was happy. Yes, she looked at Lucy. And you, a grandmother, if you agree. Of course I would agree. The atmosphere was very familial. They had a wonderful evening. After that, they got into their cars and drove home. When they stopped at one of the intersections, Lucy noticed a familiar silhouette in the car next to her. It was Jacob, and as soon as he felt someone looking at him, he turned around. The woman smiled. She could see the man's face start to turn white when he saw her in the nice car, next to the imposing man beside her. Will you marry me? Nanny asked her at that moment. Yes, she smiled. She had finally found the happiness she had been searching for all of her life. Okay, as always, your take. Smiling was also contraindicated for now. Lucy studied hard. She didn't want Nanny's money to go to waste. She did everything the doctor said. Finally, it was time to remove the bandages. Lucy looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe it. Yes, her head was slightly tilted to the side, but now only she noticed it, and most importantly, she could control it. But the distortion of facial expressions wasn't what it used to be, especially since the surgeon had said that as she practiced daily, it would go away completely. I can't believe it, she looked at her friend. And he did it. Everyone wanted only to cripple you, but he cured you. Elizabeth raised a finger up. It was necessary to stay here a little longer. Elizabeth was told that Lucy no longer needed an escort. She had to go home. What a pity that you and I are not back together, the friends hugged. Come, let's go to mine, reminded Lucy of her friend's promise. I will. She kissed her on the cheek and left. Lucy had time to think. After all the treatments and everything else, she would lie on the bed or sit by the window and look out there. There were only good thoughts in her head. She thought that even as she left Mickey and Maria, she would never forget them. When the girl gives birth, she could stay with her grandchildren. The door opened a little. Yes, Lucy wondered. No one had come to see her at this time already. She looked around, saw Nanny. Madama, he spread his arms to embrace the woman. I think you're flattering me a little. She stood up and walked towards him. No, I never lied to anyone, nor do I say flattering words. The man hugged Lucy, and then they sat down right there in the ward. I'm glad of that fact. She looked at him. He was handsome. Lucy began to imagine what he must have been like when he was younger. He must have had a lot of girls. Listen, you're being discharged in a couple of days. I want to pick you up myself and surprise you. He didn't say what. Okay. She didn't understand why she needed permission for that. Promise that I'll do everything the way I want, and if you don't like it, you'll fix it, he said, and then didn't look her in the eye. For what you've already done to me, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life, she pointed at her face. Deal then, he took her hand as he always did, kissed it, and left the room. It was nice to be cared for by someone other than yourself. Lucy waited to be discharged, and it came, just like Nanny had said, 2 days later. Hey, he was alone. I thought Maria would be with you. The woman was surprised. Let's go. Remember I promised you a surprise, the man reminded her. Yes, I'm very curious what it will be. She got into the car. First in line was the beauty parlor. Why? She turned to him. She realized she didn't look good, but she could do it herself, but later. Quietly, he put a finger to his lips, you promised. Lucy went. Nanny waited patiently in the car. Her hair was colored, styled. The woman Nines looked immediately younger. After that, a little makeup. She walked to the car. She felt like she had been transformed into a queen. Beautiful. Nanny couldn't help but compliment her. Where to now? She turned to him. To the store, the man said confidently. You're so crazy. She shook her head. You'll understand everything later, he spoke in riddles. Several dresses were already ready to be tried on when Lucy went in there. She wore them all. They were all gorgeous. But she chose one, the blue one. She liked that color so much. As she walked to the car, Nanny almost cried. What's going on with you? She couldn't understand.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.